My brother quit his job overnight without any kind of backup plan in the slightest, and now he expects my mom to support him while he refuses to get a job. And at this point, I'm so burnt out that I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what's happening. Okay, I want to start off by saying that my brother is 32 years old. He had a dead-end night shift job, which I know was impacting his mental health, but this man just quit without any plans and now fully expects my mother to support him and give him money. He also lives with her, and I live in a different country. Now, he doesn't want to look for another job for 6 months so that he can focus on his health. And this is because he has ballooned to over 400 pounds. Naturally, he expects my mother to plan out all his healthy meals for him because he can't cook and doesn't even go along with her to get groceries. My mother is currently in a financial black hole and is terrible with money. She's also possibly in the middle of an elaborate scam, which is an entirely different story altogether. Now, all of this is something my brother knows, and yet, even still, he quit his job. I helped them both out financially for years, but stopped last year because I was getting horrifically burnt out doing 3 part-time jobs while also working on my PhD. My mother kept lying to me about where the money I sent was going and constantly kept asking for more. So I made the hardest decision of my life and I stopped financially supporting them because my lifestyle had become unsustainable. I still buy my mother's medication directly through the pharmacy, but my brother clearly resents me cutting them off. And so does my mother, for the record, but she shows it less and doesn't take it out on me, at least. I had an argument with my brother when I called him yesterday, and I begged him to please find some work so that he can help out our mother just a little bit. He then got angry and said, "Well, now I'm not going to look for a job for 1 year. The more you badger me, the more I'll delay. What are you going to do about it?" And then to top it all off, he said to me, "I know you're so worried about us. Why don't you take another trip to Japan, huh?" Now, for reference, I saved for this trip for 5 years, since like 2020, and finally I was able to go this year. So clearly he resents that too. Honestly, this comment made me cry and I hung up soon afterwards. I'm honestly so tired and I just don't know what to do. Okay, honestly, in my opinion, giving more money is not going to solve anything, and I think if I was in your shoes, I would cut them off and say, "I'm sorry, but I can't keep doing this." I would then absolutely explain to my mom and be like, "Look, this guy's playing all of us. He's refusing to get a job. Like, this is not working for anybody. Like, I'm really surprised he even still lives in that house. I know if I tried to pull that with my mom, she would kick me out immediately. Like, that's never going to happen." So I completely understand where you're coming from, and I don't blame you for the decision you made, because this kind of behavior is completely toxic. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for sitting in first class while my mom sat in economy? Because she's saying that I should have switched my seats with her so that she could sit up there and I sit in the back. And now that the entire family is turned against me and is saying I'm the jerk for not giving up my seat, I'm honestly starting to question everything and I now just don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. I'm a 26-year-old male and I just got back from a really long work trip. I've been traveling a lot lately, barely sleeping, and overall I've just been completely drained. So for once, I said screw it and I just used my points to upgrade to first class. And I've never flown first class before. Now, my mom happened to be flying the same route because we were both heading to a family thing. She booked her ticket separate from mine and she was in just basic economy. Now, at the time, I didn't think it was a big deal. And at the gate, I told her, "Hey, just so you know, I'll see you when we land. I'm sitting up front." And when I said that, she looked at me like I had taken out her dog. She asked if I was serious and then said, "You're really gonna let your own mother sit in the back while you relax in first class?" And I thought she was kidding, but apparently she wasn't. She told me I was being selfish, ungrateful, and disrespectful, that she raised me better than this. And I said, "Mom, I love you, but I paid for the seat with my own money and I'm exhausted. I just want one flight where I'm not sandwiched between 2 strangers." But at this point, she is now very pissed off. She told my aunt, who told my cousins, and now half the family is calling me a jerk for not giving her my seat. And honestly, I don't think I did anything wrong, but now I feel really weird about it. So yeah, am I the jerk for not switching? Because right now things are incredibly messy. No, you're not the jerk. This is so stupid. These people really expect you to give up that seat that you paid for? Like, really? That is so dumb. If she wanted a first class seat, then she should have, I don't know, bought one herself. And why should you give it up? Like, seriously. It's not like she was gonna be sitting next to you anyways. She is literally sitting in economy and she bought her ticket separate from you. Like, dude, what is she complaining about? And to any family members who are trying to be like, "Wow, you're a jerk for not giving up your seat." Like, this is so stupid. Like, if they really feel that way, then upgrade her seats when she flies back home. Like, at that point, just put your money where your mouth is. Because your mom clearly only cared about getting that first class seat, and she did not care about your comfort in the slightest. An entitled Karen falsely claims that I hit her car with my shopping cart, which conveniently enough allowed me the opportunity to put her in her place in a way that I'm sure she will never forget. Here's what happened. Okay, so I I was emptying my grocery cart into my car when out of nowhere an entitled Karen approaches. I could tell she wanted to say something to me, and I assumed I was in her way, so I apologized and I moved aside to give her more room. As she approached, she said out loud, "Is your shopping cart hitting my car? Did you just hit my car?" And for reference, it was a new Dodge Charger. So I responded by saying, "No, of course not. I'm not even touching it." But instead of listening to me, she doubled down and accused me even further. So I said to her, "I would never hit someone else's car." So she responded back by saying, "Well, it really looked like you did." So I just said, "Okay," and I continued loading my car with my groceries. Now, I audibly chuckled a bit over how she acted while I was loading. No introduction, no apology, just a bunch of accusations. And this is likely because my car is noticeably old, and I'm wearing my caregiver clothing, which are just junk clothes. I put my cart back, and as I'm walking back to my car, I said to her in my sweetest caregiver voice that she should have a great day, and I hope she enjoys her wonderful, expensive Charger. I then got into my car, and as I pulled out, I looked over to her one more time, and that's where I noticed her dog was in the car as she was about to open her car door. The car was not running, and there were no windows cracked, and it was 90 degrees outside. So in my sweetest caregiver voice again, I said softly to her, "And you left your dog in your car on a hot day. Shame on you." I then ignored her after that, and I left, but I could hear her being all upset and yelling something at me, which honestly was incredibly satisfying, especially after the way she treated me. Oh wow, this Karen's just that kind of person. She's not only a terrible person for trying to accuse you of things that didn't happen, but she also left her dog in the car while it was not running. Like, dude, this lady's an idiot. She could have killed her dog. Like, what a moron. So good for you for making her feel probably incredibly stupid, because from the sounds of it, she absolutely deserved it. Am I the jerk for not paying for my roommate's groceries after she literally spent all of her food money on clothing and shoes? Because right now she's saying that I'm discriminating against her all because I have more money and that I could easily help her out and that this is what friends do, leaving me wondering if I really am the jerk in this scenario. Here's what's going on. Okay, so my roommate and I have been living together for 8 months. We split rent and utilities, but buy our own food and personal stuff. Last week, my roommate, who we will call Anna, came home with a bunch of new clothes and shoes. She was showing them off and mentioned she got everything on sale, but still spent like $300. Now, I didn't think much of it at the time, but then yesterday, she asked if she could borrow some of my food because she was running low. I said sure, thinking that she meant like a few things, but when I got home from work, she had eaten almost all of my leftovers and made dinner using a bunch of my ingredients. When I asked her about it, she said she didn't have money for groceries this week because she spent too much on clothing. She even said that she would pay me back when she gets paid next Friday. Now, I was annoyed, but figured it was just a one-time thing. But then today, she asked if I could spot her for groceries this week. She said she would pay me back, but she really needs food and I have plenty of money according to her. Well, I told her I wasn't comfortable with that and that she needed to figure out her own budget. She then got really defensive and said I was being mean and that friends help each other out. But the thing is, I have a better job because I didn't drop out of college like she did, and I can afford things because I budget, and I don't spend my food money on unnecessary things. She's been really cold to me ever since then, and even said I was being classist for not helping her when she's struggling. So seriously, am I the jerk here? Because right now I'm honestly incredibly annoyed. Okay, your friend is a complete idiot. This roommate literally doesn't know what she's talking about. It's not even funny. Is she really trying to be the victim here? It's like, I'm sorry, but the original poster didn't spend all their money on clothing. You did. Like, how is this the original poster's fault in the slightest? This all comes down to Anna not knowing how to handle her money and somehow still blaming you for her poor decisions. Like, that's just stupid, bro. Like, what are you talking about right now? So no, of course you're not the jerk, because all these problems that Anna's facing are literally things that she did to herself. Did I overreact for telling my fiancé that I want a prenup agreement after he made a joke about putting everything in his mom's name if we ever divorce? Because right now everything is kind of falling apart and I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, so this just happened and I'm still kind of stunned about it. My fiancé and I have been together for 5 years and engaged for 7 months. We were discussing finances and casually talking about wedding stuff when he joked with me and said, "Well, if we ever split, I'll just put everything in my mom's name. That way I can't lose what's not mine, right?" Now, I laughed awkwardly and I said that wasn't funny, and he just doubled down and said, "No, but seriously, it's kind of smart. My mom's always had my back." I then told him that's actually really shady, and it makes me feel like he's already planning an escape route. He then said I was being dramatic and said to me, "Well, if you don't have anything to hide, a prenup should be no big deal." So I said to him, "Cool, let's get one." He's now sulking and saying I clearly don't trust him and that I'm ruining the romantic part of our engagement. But it's like, didn't he bring it up first with that joke? His mom texted me today saying that I'm already acting like we're divorcing before the wedding. So seriously, am I overreacting here? Because this seems like a really messy situation. Dude, this guy is one big walking red flag. Like, are you kidding me right now? Holy crap. If I was in your shoes, there's no way I would take this as some kind of like casual joke. joke. This guy probably really means this and he's testing the waters. In fact, he's probably already done this and he's waiting to see what your reaction is. Like, why on earth would he instigate a prenuptial agreement or even signing everything away to his mom before you guys get married? That is so stupid. Like, that's obviously what he's planning on doing. So no, you didn't overreact, and honestly, this is incredibly sketchy. Am I the jerk for bringing my dead father up in front of my mother's new husband? Because apparently I just found out that he's jealous of my dad. And now my mom and my aunt are turning on me and freaking out about me making any kind of comments like this. And at this point, I'm honestly incredibly frustrated. Here's what's going on. Okay, I want to start off by saying that I'm so upset, I just don't know if I'm in the wrong or not. I'm a 28-year-old female, and my father passed away of cancer back in 2018 when I was 20 years old. Last weekend, my mother remarried. I get along well enough with her new husband. He is a cool guy in general, and he treats me and my mother well. He also has a 13-year-old daughter from a previous relationship, as he's been married and divorced with his ex. They have a 50-50 custody split of their daughter. During the wedding on Saturday, everyone had fun. I even shed some tears of joy for my mom. But Sunday, something shifted. My cousin asked if I'm going to call my mom's new husband dad, and I obviously said no. I already had a dad, and I was a fully grown woman by the time he came into my mother's life. After that comment, my mother and her sister pulled me aside and started yelling at me to stop bringing up my father in front of her new husband, because apparently he's jealous of a dead man. His ex is alive and they see each other every weekend to pass off the kid, but he's jealous of a dead man. I basically told them to get off of me, that I did not do it deliberately, but my father had been my father for 20 years, and naturally I bring him up sometimes in passing, especially to my younger cousin who was only 7 years old when my dad passed and barely remembers him. My aunt then went into this huge tangent. She said to me, "Your dad was important to me, but it's not important to anybody else anymore. You need to let go and move on instead of talking about him because everyone else is." Well, when she said that in turn absolutely made me cry, and I didn't speak to either of them for the rest of the day. So seriously, am I the jerk for bringing my dad up sometimes? Is it reasonable for my mother's husband to be jealous of a literal corpse? Because right now I'm incredibly frustrated. No, you're not the jerk. This is really insensitive behavior. You have every right to talk about your dad. Like, are these people being serious right now? Like, your mom and aunt are out of line. And for this guy to be jealous of your dad, like, seriously, dude, what are you talking about? He is literally no longer alive, and you're sitting there trying to be like, "Oh yeah, I'm jealous of that. I'm jealous that he was around when I wasn't." Like, this is all some crazy behavior and like absolutely uncalled for. Because obviously, no, you are not in the wrong for mentioning your father. You have every right to talk about him as much as possible, and just because your family's trying to forget him and never talk about him again, doesn't mean that you have to do the exact same thing. Am I the jerk for not lending my car to a friend who had totaled theirs while they were drunk driving? Because right now my friends are saying that I'm a bad person for not helping them out, and at this point I honestly don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, my friend, who we will call Mike, has been friends with me ever since we were in college. 2 weeks ago he got arrested for drunk driving and he totaled his car. Thankfully, nobody got hurt, but his license is suspended, and his car is completely destroyed. But ever since then, he's been asking to borrow my car just for emergencies and important stuff. At first, I felt bad for him because losing your car really sucks, and I was considering it at first. But then I found out more details about what happened. He wasn't just a little bit over the limit, he was completely wasted. We're talking like twice the legal limit. He hit a parked car and then drove into a fence before the police found him. And he's lucky that someone didn't die. When I told him I wasn't comfortable lending him my car, he got really upset. He said he learned his lesson and would never drink and drive ever again. He also pointed out that I let him borrow it before when his car was in the shop last year. But this really feels different to me. Before, his car was just having mechanical problems. Now, I know he's made some really dangerous decisions behind the wheel, but what if he decides to drive after having just one drink or something like that? When it comes to my friends, they are kind of split on this. Some think that I should help him out since he's going through a rough time, and others think I'm being smart by protecting myself and my property. Mike keeps bringing it up and saying that I'm being a bad friend. He says he needs a car to get to work and that I should trust him. So honestly, am I the jerk for not wanting to give him my car? Because right now I'm honestly not sure what to do. Okay, I'm gonna say this as plainly as possible. Any of your friends who are saying, "Oh yeah, you should lend him your car," they are not your friends, and in fact, they are complete idiots. This guy had his license suspended. We're not just talking like, "Oh yeah, he got in an accident." He got his license suspended for drunk driving. And if he got caught driving again on a suspended license in your car, you can bet that car is gonna get impounded and you're probably gonna get in trouble in some kind of way. Like, if I was in your shoes, I would tell this guy absolutely not. And then I would point to the friends and be like, "Oh yeah, they'll give you their car. They disagree with me, go talk to them." Like, no way are you gonna do that with my property, dude. Absolutely not. Because this really is a no-brainer, and anyone telling you otherwise is completely out of their mind. An entitled delivery driver calls my workplace to try and complain complain about my driving, despite the fact that he's the one that cut me off, forcing me to go around him on the road. But instead of ignoring this kind of comment, I decided to get some petty revenge by calling up his workplace and complaining to his store owner, resulting in this guy most likely getting fired again. Here's what happened. So this happened not too long ago. I happened to be on my way to work one morning, and I was cut off by a delivery driver for an automotive parts store in the United States. And this is honestly no big deal for me. It's kind of a hard corner to see traffic coming, so I totally get it. However, I did go around them in a center lane. I know, not exactly the correct thing to do, but I also didn't want to slam on my brakes, and these delivery drivers normally drive slow. So I went around and it was in a completely safe manner. No other traffic around us. I continued on my way to work and didn't think much of it. I mean, it does happen, and I don't ever call and complain about it because, again, it was a blind corner. Even in my bright red car, it can be hard to see. Well, fast forward to when I'm at work and my phone rings. I answer it and it's the company of the car that cut me off. He asked me who drives the red car and I told him it was me. He thought he held the moral high ground and was going to try and tell me how wrong I was and how I need to be a better driver. And you know, while also taking none of the blame, because nowadays it's always someone else's fault, right? So now at this point, I'm incredibly ticked off, and I then decide to get some petty revenge. I call the corporate number and I complain about being cut off and the driver calling my own workplace to complain to me. Within a few minutes, the store owner of the franchise called to discuss what had happened. I then let him know the story, and I even reiterated that I was never going to call and complain in the first place about being cut off until I got a phone call from this jerk himself. Well, the owner was pretty angry that his employee did that, because according to them, this employee was rehired in the first place, which I'm positive must have led to a very interesting conversation. Oh man, imagine being so stupid that you call somebody up just to then shoot yourself in the foot like, dude, what are you doing? You're the one that cut this guy off, and then you had the audacity to call them up and be like, oh, you need to be a better driver. It's like, dude, do you want to get fired again? Like, what's going on right now? Getting rehired to a place that clearly this guy got fired from is not an easy task in and of itself. So for him to go out of his way and be like, you're the one that cut me off, you need to be a better driver. Like, that kind of behavior after the way he was acting on the road is completely delusional and so far out of touch. Because what is going on right now? That's so dumb. Why would you do that to your career? So yeah, this guy's a complete moron, and any trouble he runs into honestly is going to be well deserved. My boyfriend said that it is not his responsibility to defend me from his family, who is absolutely treating me like garbage, because right now I'm dealing with so much mistreatment from his family that he literally refuses to acknowledge, leaving me in a place that honestly is making me question this entire relationship. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, I want to start off that I've mentioned to my boyfriend of almost 4 years that I sometimes feel uncomfortable because his mother and sister aren't always kind to me. Sometimes their disrespect is obvious and sometimes it's subtle. His mother minimizes the way she sometimes treats me, and his sister tried to lie to me when I once mentioned something that she did. I also asked him to stand up for me more, and sometimes he does, but he recently told me that it's not his job. He thinks that I should stand up for myself when his family disrespects me. Now, I disagreed with it, and I think that it is his responsibility as it's his family. I mean, I would defend him if my family was disrespecting him. Also, I feel like he puts his family above me, and I find it hard to believe that he doesn't notice when they disrespect me. Somehow, he always seems to notice when men look at me in public, but apparently he doesn't notice all the times his mother and sister are disrespectful towards me specifically. He talks a lot about how unity matters to him and wants me to have a relationship with his family, and I respect that, but I don't feel comfortable around people who clearly just don't want me to be there. He seems to live in a world where his family is always kind to everyone, which just isn't true. Him defending his family by excusing their behavior and saying how much they did for me, like inviting me on vacation for example, really discourages me from telling him how I feel. I want to give him the unity that he wants, but I also don't want to deal with the disrespect, especially while feeling like an outsider. He is usually a very logical and skeptical person, but quickly believes his family's lies. And it's disappointing because he is usually not like that. I feel like I can't have a good relationship with people who can't acknowledge their mean behavior, and I don't know what to do. At this point, I'm wondering if this relationship is even worth it, because I seriously am at such a breaking point. Okay, I've got to be honest with you, I think your boyfriend is a toxic piece of garbage. Not only is this absolutely his responsibility, but the fact that he's not doing anything about it and choosing to just like turn a blind eye to it, like that in my opinion is absurd and completely uncalled for. He has no right to treat you that way. And yes, this is him actively treating you like garbage, because you've got it 100% right. If this was your family, you absolutely would step in and be like, guys, you got to be nicer to him. Like, that really is a reasonable thing to do. I know I would do that. If I had a partner who was like, yeah, your family's super rude, I would go to my family and be like, look, if you ever want to see my partner ever again, you're going to back off and leave them alone. phone, because what's happening right now is just dismissive and so uncalled for. And just for the record, this guy is not logical. What he really is just lazy. He's lazy because he doesn't want to do anything about the fact that you're being mistreated, which again is completely unacceptable, because instead, from the sound of it, he wants you to just submit to whatever's going on and not do anything about it. He wants you to stay quiet and put up with this crap when in reality you absolutely should not have to do that. So yes, this is your boyfriend's responsibility to defend you against his family, and the fact that he's not willing to do that is a major red flag. And I know for a fact if I was in your shoes, I would be trusting my instincts here, and I would be like, okay, I need to find a better relationship, because what's going on with my boyfriend is completely uncalled for.
Customer says I'm cheating him out of his food, so I give him exactly what he wants. When I was 13 or 14, I decided I wanted a PS3. My dad refused to buy me one, but my uncle made me an offer I couldn't refuse. He said that if I worked at his sweets shop for the 2 months of summer break, he'd buy me a PS3 and some games in lieu of payment. For teenage me with no commitments, this seemed fantastic. Uncle sells almost every type of Indian sweet and snack, from rasgullas to samosas to even dosas now. Come for the samosa, stay for the chai, I used to say. But we sold a special kind of snack known as a mini samosa in his shop. They're like samosas, but smaller, about 3.5 to 4 centimeters in size, which is about 1 in 2,286 of a football field for my American friends who use freedom units. They were sold by weight in sealed packs of 250 grams and 500 grams, as these were the most common amounts people bought. Making those packages turned out to be my job. You see, sometime between now and when Uncle started his business, he realized that 250 grams was roughly the weight of 28 mini samosas, and thus 56 were 500 grams. So instead of weighing each packet, I was told to just pack by counting individual items, which was easier and saved time. We also sold them individually for people who wanted larger, smaller, or unusual amounts. This was also around the time when our government started airing customer awareness PSAs, Jago Grahak Jago, for my fellow Indians. Basically, just telling customers to be aware of fraudulent business people. This is relevant. So one particularly hot afternoon, it was just me and my uncle at the shop. In India, frequent power cuts are very common during summers, and thus there were no fans or AC running in the shop. Both tempers and temperatures were running high at the shop that day. It was then that the villain of our story, Mr. Karan, made his entry. He was a local resident and a regular. He seemed angry from the onset when he barged into the shop. He took a look at the fans and saw they weren't running, then angrily picked up 500-gram pack of samosas and asked, "How many samosas are in this thing?" "That's 500 grams, I said. "I said how many, not how much," Mr. Karan literally screamed. "Again, how many are in this?" 56, I replied immediately, since, I packed them. "How can you be so sure? You didn't even count. You're trying to cheat me." Mr. Karan was now in full-scale Karen mode. "I demand you pack me 500 grams of those individual ones, and don't you dare cheat me again." I looked over at my uncle, wet with sweat, fanning himself with yesterday's newspaper. He slowly nodded. I beamed a huge smile. "Sure, sir, whatever you want." So I took a bag, packed up some samosas, and started putting them on a balance. I kept counting samosas as I put them in until they were a little over 500 grams. Then I removed the last samosa and the weight fell below 500. Now, keeping my eye contact with Mr. Karan, I crushed the samosa and started putting its powdery remains in the bag until it was exactly 500 grams. But wait, there's more. Mr. Karan apparently didn't seem to mind powdered samosa, but instead asked smugly, "So, how many samosas now?" 48, I claimed triumphantly. You see, sometime in the past, my uncle's old chef retired and the new chef made samosas with a little bit more filling in them. They looked the same size on the outside and only weighed a couple of grams more each, and since he made them in bulk and also sold to other shops in the area, the price wasn't too much of an issue. So my uncle let it slide. But those couple of grams add up on mass orders, and that's what Mr. Karan found out the hard way. He looked sheepishly at the pre-packaged samosas and then at his own package and asked if he could buy the former instead. "No, my nephew made a package specially for you at your own request, so that's what you have to buy," my uncle finally spoke. Mr. Karan silently took his pack, paid, and left. He was a lot more respectful during his subsequent visits. I was reminded of this story yesterday when my PS3 finally died. As evident, English is not my first language. In fact, it's not even my third, so please excuse any mistakes. I wish you all a very happy Diwali. May your happiness levels be as high as my electricity bill this month. I really have to know whether that was Mr. Karan's actual name, because that translates way too well into Karen, the villain of approximately 60% of our given stories on the channel. But aside from his very rude and abrupt entry, it sounds like he rather accepted his fate, rather than pig-headishly fighting on and eventually just fleeing the store like our more conventional Karens would do. It seems like Indian male Karen learned to temporarily keep his entitled nature in check in this particular store. Also, can we talk about how excellent the author's writing was, despite his apologies at it being far from his main language? Like, I didn't have to change the script from his original story at all. He wrote more fluently and with fewer mistakes than the narrator's day-to-day work. Very impressive. Also, as someone whose PC regularly overheats in a very cold country, I don't understand how such machines survive any amount of strenuous gaming in such a hot and humid place as India. Hopefully you're able to get a replacement console soon. Also, I really want a samosa right now. So thanks for that. If you don't have a good review, don't say anything at all. Say no more. This happened years and years ago when my school had taken us on a 2-day field trip to a hill station close to a city. It's like a small vacation town in the hills outside of major urban areas of India. All of us on the trip were kids who were in the 6th to 8th grade. And the trip was a blast, and everyone had fun. The event happened just before you were supposed to leave. So our school had a weird policy where after every field trip, they would gather all of the students in one room and pick out a random group of students and ask them to say a couple of sentences about the venue and experience, whatever. 5 of us were chosen for it this time, and we were asked to wait in an adjacent room and come out one by one. It was all cool till the first girl went up to the mic and said, "The experience was nice, but I felt that the food that was served was stale. I think a few people got sick." As soon as she finished speaking, the vice principal flew into a rage as she descended on this poor girl and started screaming, "Who do you think you are? These guys have been working super hard for us all weekend. If you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all." Now, her reaction might not make sense, but the hotel where we were staying belonged to some relative of hers, which is probably why we were there in the first place, and she felt some kind of way about that. The girl almost started crying as she came back to us. I was up next, so I was standing and waiting, but the VP went on a long rant about being well-behaved and setting a good example. I think at this point it's worth talking about one of the other kids chosen to do this pointless exercise. He was an older kid in the 8th grade, and he had had an accident on the trip, so his arm was slinged up. The accident was, I think, caused partly by negligence from the hotel staff. I'm blanking on the details right now, and he was fully prepared to talk about it. So his tantrum made him especially annoyed, especially because the same vice principal had refused to send him home early from the trip because it would cost too much. He told us this later. The guy holds my arm and tells me, "Hey, she said don't say anything if it's not good, so don't say anything." So I went out, stood there for a few seconds, said, "I don't have anything to say," and came back. The kid who went after me did the same, and this guy went last. He goes up to the mic, and at this point the VP is shouting again, "Did you do this? Don't you dare say nothing," or something of that sort. He said, "I loved being there. Glad I was able to be here even after I hurt my arm. I'll be really sad now that I have to go back to my parents and an actual doctor." The vice principal lost her crap at that. Most of the kids were too young to understand sarcasm, but they definitely did start laughing at her. She threatened to suspend and fine everyone there, and she delayed the buses back to our town by 2 hours as punishment. A few days later, they called my parents in for a disciplinary meeting, and the VP started narrating the story to them. When she got to the point about the complaint from that first girl, my dad said, "Wait, so the hotel was serving stale food?" I think the VP got kind of shook by that bit because I was asked to go back to class shortly after, and nothing else came of it. I've been seeing a lot of comments generally to the tune of, "How could she do this with no repercussions?" So, I'm from India, and schooling culture in the country is very disciplinarian in nature. Most teachers and parents would agree that kids need to be put in their place and all that good stuff. A lot of us were so disillusioned with the way the school treated students that towards the end of my time there, students used to keep whatever trophies they won for the school within the team, because usually they won in spite of the school and not because of it. As I'm remembering some details slowly, I'm not sure if that older kid for sure had a broken arm, but I just remember it being in a weird sling and he was wearing some kind of wrist brace too. There were smaller clinics in the area, so he may not have been completely neglected in terms of immediate medical attention. I was wondering what part of the world this was, where teachers could get away with so blatantly mistreating the kids like this without being fired with prejudice before the kids' tears had even hit the ground. I know that in the US it feels like they can get fired for both perceived physical bullying, like touching a student on the arm, and having the sheer nerve to suggest things like maybe there's something in favor of this evolution thing people are talking about. So yeah, I know nothing about the education system in India, but it sounds like way too big a step in the opposite direction. They shouldn't be ruling over the kids with an iron grip and preventing them from getting medical treatment with no fear of consequences. That is some terrific solidarity on display from these kids, complying with the instructions given to them to the letter. It's a shame that they didn't get the chance to goof around like kids should have the chance to. This passive resistance is the sort of thing that you see in people who are subjected to injustices from above like this all the time. They likely don't have any other way to fight it, so it's the best they can do until they're out of school. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. You want to return everything? Okay, watch me scan every item. This was back when I worked as a manager at a grocery store. I worked customer service, but when it would get busy, I'd run the register until it slowed down. One night, I had to take a few customers, and this one big guy comes in, and he was really just in a terrible mood, huffing and puffing. He looked like he came straight out of Duck Dynasty. Beard, camo, hat, you get the picture. We finished the transaction and I'm starting to head back to customer service when the guy looks at his root beer that he just bought and says, "Diet? I didn't want diet. You know what? Forget it. I don't want any of this crap anymore, just take it all back." So now I'm struggling to figure out why, 1, this is my fault, and 2, why he can't just switch it out for the regular soda. His order was huge, and normally in these situations, I just put it through as a refund for whatever amount was on the receipt. But since this guy was being a real prick, I just decided to scan and return each item individually. Now he's getting more mad and cursing, saying to hurry up, and I just responded, "Sorry man, it has to go through our system." And then he screams, "Give me the fricking money!" So security heads up front. I just laughed and said that's not how it works. We finish everything, he takes his money and leaves. About a week later, I'm running the register again and he jumps on my line. When he saw I was the one on register, he tried to get out of line, but all the other registers had huge lines as well. It's finally his turn and he says, "Hey man, I'm really sorry about the other day. I was having a bad day and I shouldn't have taken it out on you." I was a little surprised, not gonna lie, and I told him, "Hey man, stuff happens, no worries." And we're cool, he's always super nice to me when he comes in and haven't had a problem since. I just wish every Karen and Ken acted like him in the end. Interesting. I'm not sure you would have ever gotten the apology and the subsequent relaxing of tensions if this customer hadn't been forced into your queue, but it does sound like everyone benefited from this being the case. It sounds like he did behave like a jerk, but that might be down to circumstance. I've definitely blown up at someone before due to unrelated circumstances and felt terrible about it afterwards. And his outburst of, "Forget it, just take it all back," is several orders of magnitude below the really big offenders we hear about on the channel. So let's call this a rehabilitated one-time jerk offender and get back to crucifying the real pieces of crap here. Compliance with company timesheet requirements resulted in a 40% pay increase. The background. I've been a freelance contractor for over 30 years in the UK and worked for many companies, usually on an hourly or daily rate. About 10 years ago, I had the opportunity to work for a client on a 6-month contract on a daily rate, and also to work from home except for some site visits for meetings. Since I was working from home, I was able to work my own hours. I was judged basically on my output, not the bum-on-seat hours. I'd work whenever I wanted, an hour here or there, multiple breaks during the workday, and also sometimes at weekends whenever I felt like it. However, I ensured that I complied with at least the 40-hour-week minimum, even though I was on a daily rate. The way that it worked on this contract was that I would submit my timesheet for my boss to sign. That would be sent to my agency, and they'd do all the work to create invoices to the end client and pay me based on how long I worked that week. I didn't have to submit invoices to the agency, they used something called self-invoicing. Now, because of the hassle of trying to record all the start times, times for breaks, etc., it was a pain to fill in the client's timesheet, which only allowed for one start time, one lunch break, one end time, and so on because I was on a daily rate. So I'd just record a standard 9 to 5:30 start and stop and a 30-minute lunch every weekday, knowing I was putting in the hours and not cheating the client. This was all well for a couple of months. My, quote, boss would sign the timesheet and the agency would invoice the client and just send me the money each month. At some point, I'd reconcile my books, noting the payments against my days worked. My boss, note the quotes, was the client person I reported to. In contractor speak, he was the client representative, not employed by my limited company or the intermediate agent. At some point, my boss balked at how I was filling in my timesheet and asked for it to be more detailed. He was simply making his own job harder by having to check the math for all the individual hours. This is where the malicious compliance took over. I'd carefully record all the periods I was working, which I did anyway, and then create a timesheet for the week. This resulted in several pages of timesheets rather than the previous 5 lines, now showing all periods I worked, all breaks I took, total hours for each day, total hours for the week, and my boss would need to check all of this and sign it, and we continued that way for a while. Now, you may think this was only a small malicious compliance. It took me extra effort to comply, and my boss got the detailed timesheet he required and nothing changed. However, there was an unexpected consequence of this compliance which was rooted in the contract I'd signed, and the contract that the client had signed with the intermediate agency. It came down to the definition of a working day. Remember, I was on a daily rate, not an hourly rate, even though the client insisted on a breakdown of all my hours. After a few months when I tried to reconcile my own company's books, it seemed I was getting paid more than I expected. 40% more to be precise. When I investigated, it turned out that I'd overlooked my contract that stated that I was paid a full day's contract rate irrespective of how many hours I worked on that day. So if I happened to work 10 hours, I'd just get the day rate. But if I worked for only an hour, I'd still get the full day rate. Since I was now giving a timesheet that also detailed the few hours I might work on Saturday and Sunday, as well as the 5 work weeks, even though I was still only working a total of 40 hours, I was getting paid for 7 days rather than 5 days. I decided not to bring it to the notice of my boss since I doubt he had the visibility of the invoices. He was just signing off my timesheet every week. This resulted in an unexpected pay rise for the final couple of months of my contract. I just wish I'd complied earlier in my contract. I was never approached about the discrepancy and went over the next few years to have 3 more contracts with that client, but not on the same terms. The contract was written by the agency, not me. They would have been well aware of the standard contract, and it was also in their interest since they got a percentage. It was malicious in that I knew the manager would need to carefully check the dozens of time periods, hours, and hours per day to ensure they came to the correct values. The rest was a bonus. Sounds like a nice ride on your part, to be honest. And like the client in question might have realized that your very favorable contract wasn't entirely your fault, since they changed the terms later but didn't come after you or refuse to hire you again. For all we know, your, quote, boss might have been under pressure from his superiors to have more accountability from his contractors. This kind of just seems like a nice little extra bonus for you. Personally, if I pulled a loophole like this on a client, I would be worried about losing them. But then again, I'm freelance, and if you have an agency that just kind of constantly gives you work, maybe that's not an issue for you. Am I the jerk for getting upset at my girlfriend for giving a tattoo to my mum? I'm a 25-year-old male, and my girlfriend, 22, and I have been together for over a year. She's covered in tattoos, which I've always liked. She's always been artistic and has been tattooing herself and her friends for years. My parents are more conservative and traditional, so when they planned a trip to visit us, I told her to just wear longer clothes to cover them up. She refused, and on the day they visited, she wore a crop top with shorts which showed off most of her tattoos. I warned her again before they came in about it, but she just shrugged me off. I was shocked when my parents came in and just started complimenting her on the tattoos, especially my mum. My mum spent ages to her talking about tattoos, so me and my dad went out to the backyard. When we came back in, my mum rushed up to my father to show off the tattoo my girlfriend gave her. It was 4 small flowers running up her arm. She said it represented our family. My dad loved it, and my mum was busy telling everyone on Facebook about it. My girlfriend then came downstairs and I asked her why she'd put that on my mum without asking me. She laughed in my face and said my mum was a grown woman. My parents then took my girlfriend's side, so I just stormed off upstairs. I could hear them for hours downstairs until my parents left. It's been a few days and I can't bring myself to talk to her after she did that behind my back. Sir, I regularly lose my crap at people in these stories for trying to control their own children, and for restricting their right to free action when they become adults. In fact, that makes up a substantial portion of the stories we run here. But that runs both ways, damn it! Your mother is an adult and can make whatever aesthetic changes to her body she damn well pleases, regardless of what you and your father think. It's just a massive bonus that in this case your dad was as thrilled as everyone else. It may be that your parents have just mellowed out in their old age and maybe aren't as high-strung as you pictured them in your head anymore. They seem nice from this limited window, but thank you for stopping our usual trend of all the people who write the posts not being the jerk. This one's on you! Grow up and recognize the rights of other grown-ups. I accidentally invited the babysitter to do a 3-way. She says, yes, before I could explain. For reference, my husband and I are in our mid to late 30s, and our sitter is in her early 20s. We have 2 young kids, 5 and 3, and through the pandemic, my husband and I have both been working from home. For a while, we were taking shifts trying to watch the kids while the other had meetings, but eventually we resorted to hiring a sitter sometimes during the day to watch them and keep them occupied so we could work. We'd gone through a couple of sitters before landing on our current one. She's been absolutely fantastic, a dream with the kids, and has been working for us for several months now. It's been such a godsend for us to hide away in our offices on our laptops, undisturbed through our work days, knowing someone is taking care of things on the other side of the door. The screw-up happened yesterday when we decided we wanted to take a night for ourselves, now that restaurants were opening up again in our area. We had the sitter come over and we went out for a night of food and drink, our first date night out at a restaurant in almost 2 years due to the pandemic. Out at dinner was glorious, drinking and flirting and being adults outside in the real world, feeling like people and not just parents or workers trapped in our home. We felt very energized and we knew how we wanted to spend that energy. But having young kids makes having alone time difficult. Our kids are fussy sleepers sometimes. We were joking to each other, saying we should ask the sitter to stay later and watch the kids so he and I could have some private time uninterrupted. When we hired our first sitter, we took advantage of the fact the kids were occupied by having a few sneaky quickies during the day while we were locked away working. But we hadn't done that in a while now, and the idea of getting some this evening without the risk of a barge-in was very appealing. When we got home, I was a little tipsy. The kids had been put to bed but weren't really settled asleep yet, so my husband went to check on them. I stayed and thanked our sitter for helping us have a wonderful night out. She was very friendly as always and assured us it was no problem. She'd help us out whenever we needed. And here is where I messed up. My tipsy brain thought it would be cute to slyly joke about having her stay and watch the kids longer, so my husband and I could have some romantic alone time together. One of those, as a joke but testing the water things, which is already crossing a line, but what makes matters worse is how I phrased it. She said we looked so happy and rejuvenated, and said we must have had a great time out. I agreed and said it was so amazing, and I thanked her so much for letting us escape as man and wife for a night to have some fun. She said something like, "No worries at all, anytime you need me, I'm happy to help with anything." To which I say, with a wry smile, "Well, we had been thinking about asking you if you wanted to stay a little longer, so we could, go into the bedroom." Which, in my mind, I was trying to suggest that she stay longer to watch the kids, so my husband and I could do the deed. But that's not how it came out. I understand now what was clearly implied by my phrasing. Her eyes went wide and her voice became hushed and serious as she asked if I was serious. And me, not understanding my screw-up yet, laughed and said I was just teasing, but we'd certainly really enjoy it. We'd done it with the other sitters in the past, but we didn't want to make her too uncomfortable, and it was completely fine if she wasn't comfortable with it. God, that phrasing. I think I'm treating the subject delicately, and that I'm asking for an understandable if slightly weird thing, like, do you want to babysit our kids while we have a bang in another room? And she's responding like she's shocked I'm asking, but is being super cool about it. She stammers a bit and says she'd love to, but can't tonight. And I try to drop it, saying it's no big deal, thinking that we're just going to do it anyway. It just would have been nice to have a guard. But she keeps insisting she would, but she can't. And she keeps stressing she can't. And I'm starting to get that she's implying she has her period. And I'm tipsy and I don't really know what that has to do with things or if I should be offering her anything. But I just keep assuring her it's no problem at all, and at this point just want her to leave so I can jump my husband. She continues to be apologetic and says she'd love to any other time. She thinks we're amazing and it's such a huge fantasy for her. And that's when something clicks in my brain and I get what we're talking about. I start to panic a bit and backpedal, saying forget that I even asked. But she doesn't want me to feel like she's blowing me off or making excuses. And I'm trying to get out of it, but I'm in too deep to say there was a misunderstanding because she's so into it and supportive, and eventually we awkwardly hug and she leaves. I freak out and run into our bedroom to my husband and spill out the story about what just happened, and he starts howling with laughter and I'm just stressed out. He's been making fun of me ever since, calling us swingers now. He's been telling me everything will be fine, just tell her it was an honest mix-up. But this girl is great with our kids and has been a dream for helping us out. I don't want to lose her as a sitter, and I'm afraid I just messed it all up. I have no idea what to do now. As I see it, I have these options. A. Pretend like I don't even remember asking. I'd been too drunk and have no idea what she's talking about when she tries to bring it up. The coward's option, potentially mean and childish, but theoretically sparing all of us the embarrassment. B. Explain truthfully what happened, that it was a misunderstanding, and risk making her feel completely embarrassed for being enthusiastically game and making our relationship with this amazing sitter very awkward. Or she might just have a big laugh over it. The adult option, own your mistakes and clear the air. C. Ghost her. Sell our home and move and change our names. The vacuum cleaner repairman option. Or D. Just roll with it and have a three-way with this girl. The heroic option. In short, accidentally propositioned our babysitter for a three-way. She seems down, but now I'm panicking. Oh, as an update, thank you for all your responses. I went with plan B, potentially leaving the door open for D. I had a chat with her yesterday, explaining everything, and we both had a good laugh about it all. She's incredible and understanding and cool, and made it very not awkward. We all admitted to a fun, mutual attraction, but we've agreed to keep things professional for now. She says babysitting is just a temporary thing for her, so when she's ready to move away, we may have an opportunity for some fun in the future, when we're not in an employer-employee relationship. Thank you for all your encouragement, wise words, kind words, and funny words. I'm feeling much less stressed now. Success! So I have to assume that the narrator was not alone in thinking that option D was a joke at first, right? So consider my mind blown that it kind of ended up being a potential thing that you all agreed to. Like, wow! Also, best letter for that particular option. D for the D. Good luck explaining that to the next sitter who is minding the kids while it happens. Maybe you'll all get even more lucky depending on how tipsy you are when you explain it to her. A rolling cycle of your relationship getting more and more open with each sitter is kind of comically incredible. But back to actual commentary on the story. I must say that your unfortunate phrasing may rival that of Tobias Funke in Arrested Development. You even accidentally doubled down, implying that you'd done it with other sitters before. Amazing work, everybody! I should add that the narrator did search this user's profile out of morbid curiosity to see if they'd followed through with the sitter in the 2 years since posting, and sadly enough there were no more posts or updates from that particular profile. Ah well, here's hoping everyone had fun and moved on. It's a fun story. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for telling my fiancé to get her insecurities in check and grow up after she humiliated my coworker? Recently, I, 25, got engaged to my amazing fiancé, a 24-year-old called Amy. I was the happiest I've ever been when Amy said yes and was nothing but excited for our wedding. We started planning the venues, the dates, and the invites. When talking about who to invite, we both agreed to invite our co-workers, as we've worked in our respective jobs for years and we like everyone we work with. As I checked off that list, Amy spoke up and said everyone from my job can come except for my work friend, Tally. Tally is also one of my close friends, so this surprised me that Amy didn't want to invite her. She's met Tally multiple times and there didn't seem to be any issues. When I asked why, she just said she doesn't like her and finds our friendship uncomfortable, saying she thinks that Tally is the kind of person to try to sway taken men and be the center of attention. After talking some more to see where she got this idea, it turned out this was based on nothing but Tally's looks, even as Amy admitted that Tally is always very kind to her. But still, Amy is adamant about Tally not going and said she makes her insecure. Amy is a beautiful woman, so I don't know why she feels this way. I told Amy that if it makes her feel comfortable not having Tally at the wedding, then that's fine. But before invitations go out, I wanted to speak to her privately to let her know, to save embarrassment. Amy agreed, and that was really that. We didn't speak on the matter afterwards. A week or so later, I went into work and Tally just started to ignore me, only really talking if it was work-related. I was confused as it isn't just her, our co-workers have started to ignore her and acting strange towards me. So I contacted her boyfriend only for him to be sarcastic on the phone. I asked what the problem was when he asked if I actually didn't know what had happened. He then filled me in. Turned out a few days earlier, Amy came to my work on my day off with invitations. I had no idea she'd even made them yet. And she handed out everyone an invite in front of Tally, then said to Tally, "You aren't invited. Women like you aren't welcome." Which has sparked everyone suggesting that Tally is my other woman. Since then, she's been approached by some sleazebag guys at work and shunned by the women. She's now looking for another job. This really made me angry, and I apologized profusely as I didn't know. When I got home that night, I confronted Amy about this. She denied it at first, but then told me she did it, but it's now not an issue because Tally's quitting her job. I flipped out, saying she clearly didn't trust me to say that and that she crossed a line doing all of this behind my back. Amy didn't see the problem and got upset, asking me why I'm so mad, with me responding, "If we're really going to get married, you need to get your insecurities in check and grow up." I stayed at a friend's, but I've had texts from Amy, her friends, and her mother saying that I'm behaving like a complete jerk for this and that Amy doesn't deserve this treatment. Let me explain a few things. 1. I've made many attempts to speak to Tally privately to find out what was happening prior to contacting her boyfriend. She brushed me off, saying she either had work to do or that there was nothing to talk about. No one would really speak to me, so I contacted her boyfriend as a last resort. Her boyfriend says he's going to pass on to Tally what I said to him on the phone. 2. The wedding is currently on hold. That's also why I'm staying at my friend's place. I need some distance to figure stuff out. I made the post because of all the texts. Wow, I'm getting a lot of responses to this, and I've got to say thank you to everyone for the advice you're giving me. But there's one thing I have to clear up. The whole suggestion that I may have actually cheated on Amy with Tally. All I ask is, can men and women not be friends without anything untoward happening? Nothing has or will ever happen with me and Tally. No feelings, nothing adult, absolutely nothing. Tally is happy and in love, and her boyfriend is someone I also consider a close friend. I was happy with Amy prior to this, and Tally is more like a sister to me. I find it pretty disturbing that people are even suggesting that I did anything with Tally. Ask yourself this. Why in God's green earth would I let and encourage Amy to meet Tally in the first place if anything had happened? That would be messed up beyond belief. Also, I don't work in an office. I have no idea where people are getting this idea from since I never said where or what industry I work in. I work in a retail chain. Nothing special. Another question that keeps coming up, what am I planning to do about Tally? Unfortunately, due to what Amy has done, all I can really do is damage control. Of course, I'm planning to explain to everyone what has happened. I don't want Tally to be going through this in the workplace. She is a genuinely kind person who doesn't deserve any of it. I'm actually on my way to speak to our boss at the moment to see what can be done. Tally's boyfriend is also saying he'll speak to her on my behalf and see if he can get her to talk to me. So, back to my Amy problem. Am I the jerk here? And sadly, that was the last update from this particular story, so either both his social life and upcoming marriage came crashing down around him, or Amy murdered him. Jokes aside, I'm going to have to hope that he didn't marry her, as she seems like kind of an underhanded person with deep insecurities that she really should be sorting out before she enters into what should be the ultimate relationship of trust with someone. Also, a lot of the comments were indeed romanticizing the author and Tally as some sort of Jim and Pam office romance, but I think that speaks pretty poorly of how we view female and male friendships. Just for the people in the back, men and women can just be pals. I sincerely hope that my theoretical future fiancé doesn't have these same kinds of insecurities, otherwise that will be a very short engagement indeed. Hopefully the author went on to a better relationship later. Customer wants to leave and take the recipe with them. So recently, a customer at my work told us that they were no longer going to use us to manufacture their products for them. We felt this was quite out of the blue, as they'd used us for more than 40 years without any problems. We got over this, however, they then asked us to give them the recipe for their product so they could take it to a competitor to make. Now, for context, when they started using us in the 70s and 80s, they provided us with their recipe to make their product the right texture, firmness, and look just how they wanted it. Over the years, we've spent time and money finding new chemicals when certain ones have been discontinued, altering the mix of chemicals so the products are still how they want them, and developing the recipe further to make it more efficient and provide better results. The way we were making their product now is completely different to how we were at the start. Because of this, my boss was unhappy with what they were asking of us. But, complying with their request, he gave them the recipe to their products. The original recipe, that is. It's fair to say they're not that happy that they're going to have to spend their time and money to update it, as we have over the last 40 years. So the two main guesses people keep writing in with, no, our product is not food, and it's also not marital aids like many people are asking. And another update to be clearer. We make X. We've made X for 100 years and expect for small orders. It's always to customer specification. For example, a matte blue color with a soft texture. We don't have contracts to supply X to customers, they just order it like you'd order online. This former customer had come to us 40 years ago and asked to get X from us, and had given a recipe on how they'd gotten it previously from someone else. Over the years, they kept coming back to us for X, but this recipe was no longer used. We still made X to their specification, but with different chemicals, dyes, pigments, and processes. Everyone was happy. Now that they're going to another business, they wanted to know exactly how we make our X for them. We didn't want to give this up and instead gave them back the recipe they gave us 40 years ago and said that that's all they'd get, as everything after was us. Because X is our main product. If we told the customer how we made X for them, they could give it to a competitor who could figure out how we make all of our X and run us out of business. Yeah, I think it's a fair guess that in this case the customer has found another supplier who's promising they could manufacture the same product for cheaper. I don't know if that falls within the bounds of jerkiness as much as a cutthroat business attitude, but yeah, it was your own research and development, and I would hazard a guess that any court would rule in your favor in terms of what you did to develop the product with new materials and streamline the manufacturing process. There's a lot of nuance here in how ruthless or money-grabbing your customer was being. It could have been that they needed to save money to avoid layoffs or shutting down, so who knows if they're that bad. But the author and their company really were under no obligation to hand over their new recipes, and I can't fault their decision. I mean, why would you give a competitor your recipe for making your product? Turning wage theft into time theft by showing up on time? My job is 12-hour shifts with a flexible start time. You must show up before 7, but you can start as early as 6 if you want, and most people opt to show up before 6:30. The last person is usually in before 6:45. We let people go home at the end of the shift on a first-in, first-out basis. In theory, you should be able to go home after you've worked your 12 hours, but in practice there's usually a disparity of arrival times between the outgoing shift and the oncoming shift. For example, I may have started at 6:15 as the fourth person in, and I'm relieved by the fourth person in on the next shift, but that person might show up at 6:45, making me stay 30 minutes late. I can't complain to that person because it's their right to show up at 6:45. I talked to my supervisor about this because it had been happening pretty frequently. She said the company won't pay me for the extra time because, according to her, it's my choice to arrive earlier than 7, and that's just the risk I take in being early. She also said she's not willing to move any people around to cover my role to get me out on time, even though they regularly do that to let people take unscheduled bathroom breaks and do training. She said it'd be different if I wasn't relieved by 7 because someone was really late, but before 7, they don't care. Solution: I show up at 6:59 now, and I'm always the last one in. I leave later than everyone, but I'm also guaranteed to never work a single extra unpaid minute. It also means that the person I relieve is having to stay late because, again, the last person usually shows up before 6:45. It also means I usually get relieved earlier than 12 hours. I still have to stay in the building until I reach 12 hours, tracked with badge cards, but ultimately they're still paying me for 10 to 15 minutes of wandering around or reading a book. So basically, they went from regularly stiffing me 15 to 30 minutes of pay to regularly having to pay me to do 15 to 30 minutes of nothing. A lot of people are asking about the unscheduled bathroom breaks. Probably sounds worse than it is. So we get 15-minute breaks every 90 minutes. And generally, if you have to use the bathroom, that's when you go. You have about 8 opportunities throughout the shift to do it. And then on top of that, you can still go between breaks if you really need it. That's what I mean by unscheduled. We get paid on those breaks, it doesn't deduct from the 12-hour time card. Well, you were in the right, but I would say you're probably also first in line for things like layoffs, which sucks. This sounds like some sort of production line job, and I guess those often operate in as penny-pinching and exploitative a way as they can. So no one could really blame you for working out a way to get paid for your shift whilst doing as little work as possible. Because if they legally could treat you worse for more money on their end, you can be sure that they would. Manager thinks I'm a hacker and calls 911. But I'm just a tech support guy. So my friend and I work for a tech support company. We're a retailer for one of the most popular point-of-sale software suites in the country. We also dabble in all the hardware and peripherals that go with it. Both my friend and I are systems analysts. He specializes in databases and menus, and I focus on integration, which usually comes down to making sure whatever stupid bean-counting program the client uses to track their sales internally works with our equally janky software. Yay! Both of us have plenty of experience in computer science, networking, and cybersecurity. So it had been a long day and we both had to stay late due to one fire or another. It was 3 in the morning and we decide the best course of action is a combo breakfast and dinner. We head to a local diner that just so happens to be one of our clients. They don't get their tech support through us, but we sell them hardware. We, being nerds and lacking basic people skills, don't notice that we're the only customers in the place. They're dead. We get coffee and our breakfast and dinner, just a couple of fat nerds enjoying the fruits of our labors. That's when my friend notices something. Mounted to the ceiling behind me is a wireless access point. I didn't know they had customer Wi-Fi, he says. It turns out they don't. The only Wi-Fi available is listed as Diner 3PD. The 3PD stands for third-party delivery, meaning that it's the Wi-Fi used to make their Grubhub or DoorDash tablet work, or whatever third-party delivery company they use. The Wi-Fi is also not password protected. Quickly forgetting ourselves, my friend and I set to work. After gaining access to the Wi-Fi through my phone, I poke and prod to find out that the Wi-Fi is plugged into their switch. This means that it's behind all of their security and basically is a backdoor into their computer system. The two of us get about as animated as fat nerds are prone to do, and begin throwing jargon around as we analyze and prod at the store's network. We find their office computer and soon we're just one password away from their internal documents. The store is horrendously unsecured. After confirming our suspicions, we discuss, and my friend says the phrase that triggers this whole situation. Okay, how would you do it? How would you rob this place? I start off on a long and elaborate plan involving a Raspberry Pi, some batteries, and a woman's purse. Any person versed in cybersecurity would be laughing at the two of us by this point. However, the general manager for the diner was not well versed in cybersecurity. We hadn't noticed, but our waitress had gone into the kitchen to do dishes, and the GM was now our waiter. He never said anything to us, but was on top of those drink refills. My friend and I compare ideas for stealing from the place and then go and estimate how valuable a diner like this would be to rob, in terms of credit card numbers and employee identities. All parts of this discussion are basic and silly. But the GM hears scary words like dark web, Bitcoin, blockchain, and other such, so he grabs a notepad and begins to write things down. So the store GM had written down as much of our conversation as he was able to, and despite mishearing some of the jargon, he does a decent job of writing down both of our plans for robbing the diner. He then calls the store's internal IT company and tells them what we're saying. The IT guy who takes their phone call is relatively new and tells the GM to call 911. Once again, my friend and I are more concerned with our food than our surroundings. Close to 10 minutes later, 2 cops show up. They sit along near us, separated by a divider, and the coffee just materializes silently at their table. They then just look at each other and quietly sip the magically appearing coffee. Again, my friend and I don't notice this. Finally, we finish our meals, pay, and leave without being challenged. The cop suggests that real hackers wouldn't actually openly discuss their hacking plans in the restaurant they intend to rob. They did, however, confirm that the stuff we were talking about sounded real, so we weren't some kids trying to get on the news or such. They suggest that we're from some software company or another similar entity. No real threat there. They will, however, make a report and do the basics to ensure we're not hurting anyone. So during our discussion, we do talk about our own company by name. This is also reported to the diner's corporate IT. This in turn gets reported to our corporate office. Our corporate states that they don't know of any employees matching our description. We work in separate buildings to them, so we don't have a lot of face-to-face interaction with our own administration. And our corporate says that hacking or counter-hacking is not a service that our company provides. So now the diner's corporate IT and our company believe that a pair of evildoers are going about masquerading as our techs and trying to talk their way into people's offices. A meeting is set up. The next day, the meeting happens, and since both myself and my friend are the senior tech analysts on duty, we're part of it. It's a conference call with the diner's corporate IT team. They explain the situation and that there may be people pretending to work for us, trying to get into our clients' systems. The police have a report on the situation, and there's a whole recording of the 2 people in question. We all sit down, and the evidence plays, and we end up staring at video footage of ourselves at a table across from a pair of cops, discussing about how insecure the store is. Our entire side of the meeting starts laughing, and my boss explains that those 2 fat nerds are not only their employees, but they're sitting in on the meeting. We both announce ourselves and apologize to everyone for causing such a scene. The diner IT team is at loss for words, and we finally hear, "So you guys could steal from us that easily?" And that, my friends, is how we almost got arrested, but instead landed a nice contract overhauling a restaurant chain's internal security. Is this the definition of failing upwards? Maybe not, since it's not like the gentlemen in question were actively doing anything wrong at the time, just a couple of tired but caffeinated lads laughing about some silly, hypothetical situations. Honestly though, I don't blame the manager for being more than a little wary and protective of his business. If I sat near 2 people openly discussing how they could break into my recording space and steal my means of livelihood, no matter how goofy and jovial they were being about it within earshot of me no less, I still couldn't just brush it off. Nonetheless, I do love the fact that these boys got called out and labeled as fat nerds in a joking fashion in front of everyone, and then ended up having a decent contract fixing the problems that they'd outlined for the customers in the first place. As evidenced by it being here, it makes for a great story and a win-win all around. Won't let me close a bank account? No problem. Not me, but my spouse's grandmother, who we'll call Frankie. After my spouse's grandfather, Bill, died suddenly of a heart attack, Frankie was understandably devastated, but went about closing his estate with a stiff upper lip, until she got to one bank account that was only in Bill's name and not a joint account with both of them. Despite having the death certificate, will, and other documentation required, the bank absolutely wouldn't let Frankie close Bill's accounts. But for whatever reason, they would allow her to withdraw money. Being the type to not suffer fools, Frankie withdrew all but 1 cent from the bank account. The next day, she got a call from the bank's branch manager explaining there were minimum balance requirements and that Bill's account would be subject to a service fee if he didn't have a certain amount of money in it at the end of each month. "No problem," Frankie tells the manager. "Just let me close the account." "We can't let you close an account in someone else's name," the manager says. At this point, Frankie realizes that it doesn't affect her if a bank account in someone else's name goes negative because of service fees. The manager won't budge and neither will she. So the next month, the account goes negative after the bank assesses a $2 service fee. That was 17 years ago. The bank still calls her from time to ask her to bring the account back into the black. But when she asks about closing the account, they tell her only Bill can close it, so she promptly hangs up on them and goes back to playing bridge with her friends. What do you even do to fix this? Update the contact details for that particular bank to the cemetery that poor Bill is buried at? Honestly, it feels like this is the kind of thing that a modern bank would just shut down an account over. That's normally what they do if there's no activity after a certain amount of time. They can't force you to pay another debt in another person's name, so I guess we just see who they start calling in the hopefully far-off event where Frankie pops her clogs and joins Bill to go and meet the great head of light entertainment in the sky. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. If it's a C# developer you want, it's a C# developer you'll get. This is the story of how I got hired at an old job I had a few years ago. The technical manager, who ultimately became my boss, was a great guy and was the one who embarked on a course of malicious compliance to get what he wanted. It happened like this. The company was small, about 20 people, and run by a CEO who knew the company's industry but didn't know anything about technology. What she knew was that she had a team of 5 developers and 1 technical manager, and that the company's code was written in the A programming language called C#. One day, her favorite member of the development team quit, whom she regarded as their foremost expert on C#. To the technical manager, this was an enormous opportunity. He had 4 other developers who knew C#, but what he was missing was an expert in database design and administration. The company processed a huge volume of data, and he knew enough about databases to know that theirs were a mess. The same data had to be recorded in multiple places and was always getting out of sync. Operations that should have taken a few seconds would run for minutes, and so on and so forth. He didn't want to replace the departed employee with another developer, he wanted a database expert. But the CEO wouldn't hear of it. She thought she knew better. Cue malicious compliance. Somehow, he got a description of the person he actually wanted into the hands of a recruiter, who found me. I had over 10 years of experience in database development and administration at that point, but had never touched a line of C# code in my life. The technical manager had a skills assessment he was giving to all candidates for the job, which was 100% database questions. There was a huge bold-faced warning at the top, which I found extremely odd, stating, "These questions are extremely difficult. It is unlikely you'll be able to answer them all. You may not be able to answer any. Do not feel any pressure to attempt questions you find too difficult, as these results are not related to the position." I was told I had 20 minutes to work on it. Well, I finished it in about 2 to 3 minutes. The questions were all actually very easy, and I walked back into the office of the technical manager to ask if I was missing something and what this was all about. He gave me a hush gesture and motioned me back into the conference room. Then he explained. His office was adjacent to the CEO's office, so he couldn't talk in there. The warning was something he had been forced to put on the test after a recruiter, who apparently had been initially just as confused as I was, had called the CEO to ask why they were giving a database assessment for a C# position. He had to play it off to the CEO as, well, it would be good to know if we happen to find a C# developer who's comfortable with databases as well. He explained all the backstory described above to me, and then we talked for about 30 minutes about databases. C# didn't even come up. The job sounded really interesting and would be a chance for me to make an enormous positive difference there. At the end, he said, "Okay, you're perfect. I'm going to recommend you for the position, but first you have to talk to the CEO. Remember, when you talk to her, you're a C# expert. Got it?" I was worried, but I thought, worst case, I get caught out and don't get the job. Best case, I can really help this company. Into the CEO's office I went. After an exchange of pleasantries, she said, "So what would you say is your number one technical strength?" I made a thoughtful face and said, "Well, it's hard to say. I have skills in a lot of different areas, but if I had to pick one, I'd probably say C# programming." Her face lit up. "Ah, fantastic," she said. "That's exactly what we're looking for." We talked a few minutes more about salary requirements and start dates. I said I could start in 2 weeks, and at the end she offered me the job. That night I stopped on the way home and bought a book about C#. I think it was literally called something like Learn C# in 14 Days. By the time I started 2 weeks later, I knew enough C# to do my job. As the technical manager had said, there was an enormous amount of database redesign to do, so the C# programming was maybe 10 to 20% of my time. I was able to get those database jobs down from minutes to seconds like they should have been, and the CEO was so impressed she never even questioned my background. I continued to learn C# on the job, and no one ever found out I hadn't been a C# expert all along. Haha, fake it till you make it, I believe they say. Well, the important thing is that everyone was happy in the end. Kind of funny that the CEO had literally no idea what she needed that particular skill for and probably assumed that you being such an expert in C# was the sole reason that everything was going so well as it was once you were hired. So that was how the company ended up with a C# developer whose expertise seemed to boil down to essentially having read a C# for Dummies manual. That's also a great motivation for those of us who lack certain essential coding skills, and apparently you can at least get the basics for some of these programs in a relatively short amount of time. So if you're ever between jobs and have a bit of downtime, why not try something like this? Who knows what new line of work you'll end up in? I think the part that slightly concerns me is that as far as the CEO was concerned, she had made exactly the right move and might have been encouraged to make more, quote, expert moves for her company going forward. Hopefully her underlings were similarly crafty in working around her demands going forward. Your working hours are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. About 4 years back, I started a new banking job. All was well, just that the management was pretty strict with timekeeping, which was weird as we were back office, and my experience was in a similar field at another bank, and we'd had flexible schedules and received time in lieu there. But rules are rules, so I followed them. I learnt my tasks and got to know the wider team. Anyway, about 4 months in, I started to realize my senior manager didn't like me. I'm pretty assertive as a person, and I do know how to stand up for myself. He hated that. I'd speak up during the meetings, ask questions, give suggestions, and so on, while the team would stay quiet. The week everything went south, I was working overtime, which was obviously unpaid. On Thursday, I did nearly 2 hours of overtime. On Friday, I thought I'd leave a few minutes early as I was done for the week. My manager was off, so I just left 10 minutes early. On Monday, I came to work, and I got called into a meeting straight away. There were 3 of us in the room, myself, my manager, and my senior manager. Our conversation went as follows. My manager said, "I heard you left work early on Friday." I said, "I did, I left 10 minutes early." "Did you ask for permission to leave early?" "It was 10 minutes early. You know I did about 4 hours of overtime last week. Why are we having this conversation?" Then my senior manager piped up, "Because you left early without asking for permission. As a senior, you should be setting an example for the rest of the team." Is this a joke? Your working hours are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., not 9 a.m. to 5:50 p.m. You shouldn't leave early without asking for your manager or my permission first. Is that clear? Got it. It's perfectly clear. I listened and started coming into the office at 9 a.m. and leaving work at 6 p.m. on the dot. At first, they didn't realize what was happening, but the week after the meeting was the last week of the month. And let's say the last week of the month was intense. Especially the final day. The reports had to be completed, signed off, and submitted before the month's end. We covered multiple jurisdictions and would deal with Southeast Asia in the morning and the Americas in the evening. Our team was expected to work overtime due to this. Here comes Friday, the last day of the month. Showtime. I'm at my desk at 9 a.m. sharp. Most of the team have already been in the office for at least an hour. I, of course, have a cup of coffee from the cafeteria because I was a bit early. My manager looks at me and raises his eyebrow, but he doesn't say anything. Work, 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 break time. We had 2 20-minute paid breaks and 1 1-hour unpaid lunch, and I was the only person to go on my break. Lunchtime, everyone was eating at their desks while I go to meet my friends for lunch. On the second break, I once again leave my workplace and go for a short stroll around. Back to work. About 5:45 p.m., I get a call from one of the senior managers in the US. She needs a report amended. There were 4 of us on that call. I'm doing the amendments as we speak and closely monitoring the time. I see it's 2 minutes to 6 p.m., 1 minute, and then 6 p.m. So this manager was rambling about the report, and then I said, "Apologies, but I have to stop you right there." "Yes?" "It's 6 p.m. here. My day is over." "Huh?" "As per my management, my working hours are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., so I must leave now. Have a great weekend and we'll catch up on Monday." I logged off, got my coat, wished everyone a great weekend, and left. It was 6:04 p.m. Both my manager and my senior manager were dumbfounded by what had happened, looking pale and staring at me in disbelief. It was a glorious sight. I wanted to apologize to my senior manager that I wasn't able to leave at 6 p.m. on the dot, but I thought that would have been way too passive-aggressive, so I just left. I did relax the rule a bit after a few months, yet I never did more than 30 minutes of overtime. Ironically, once my stakeholders understood that I wouldn't be available for more than 10 hours, they started collaborating earlier in the month. I'd have most of my reports done and submitted by the last day of the month. Plus, I had a much better working relationship with my stakeholders. There was less finger-pointing if something went south as well. Of course, I had bad days too, but that was an exception, not the rule. There was an increase in my workload as the month end approached, but it was no more than 20%. I just had to work a bit faster. I never needed to skip my lunches or work overtime. To clarify some things people are asking about, this took place in Europe. I was a salaried employee, about 40 hours a week. I left that job about 10 months after the event took place. I didn't get into trouble and nobody tried to fire me. My probation period was over, and we have employment laws regarding constructive dismissal. So I know their hands were tied. I can't imagine ever getting away with this in any of my old workplaces. You, sir or madam author, have nerves of steel to simply walk out while maintaining eye contact with your managers that way. Then again, it seems like they knew exactly what was happening and that they knew it was more or less on them. Which means that even though they're still jerks, at least they're realistic ones who stick to their own rules, which in a way is kind of respectable. And it sounds like it might have really worked out for everyone in the end. You get completely away from having to work overtime, their silly rule is enforced, and the worst that happens is you occasionally get a little rushed at the end of the week. I'd say, on balance, things were okay, even if you didn't get the satisfaction of making them eat their words and reverse the policy. Karen tries to scam me for a free Subway sandwich by saying I didn't give her change. Here's a Subway story for you all. Today, a woman came in with her teenage daughter. I said hello and asked if I could help them. The daughter asks for the bathroom code so she can wash her hands, while Karen stands in the line looking at her phone. More people come in and Karen is still on her phone. The conversation is happening while people are lining up behind her. Karen finally deigns to talk to me. "What's the sub of the day?" I say, "Roasted chicken." "That's not what the sign says. It says either chicken teriyaki, ham, turkey, or…" And I cut her off. The sub of the day changes every day, and since today is Tuesday, it's roasted chicken. The daughter comes back and stands with her. "Oh, well that's shady advertising. Whatever. I'll get 2 6-inches of that. Just keep the meat off my daughter's side as she's a vegetarian." I ask the daughter if she wants me to make her sandwich first so I don't touch the meat and then her veggies. She says please and tells me what kind of bread she wants. I make it really quick and she asks about a garlic sauce we have. She ended up liking it and wanting it for her sandwich. Then Karen chimes in, "I want that for my sandwich too, and chipotle and mayo." "Okay, what kind of bread would you like?" This is where Karen turns into a mega thunder punt. "I was just about to ask what kind of bread you guys have, but apparently you can't keep your mouth shut." I should mention that talkback of any kind to customers is a big no-no at Subway. The last person that did it, and man, I love her for it, got a write-up and her hours cut to 4 hours a week for 2 whole weeks. At our Subway, we don't have the right to refuse service, so I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I really thought about snapping back, but I needed the job at the moment." Karen threw her hands in the air and interrupted, Stop wasting my time. What kind of breads do you have? I told her, and after she just told me to keep my mouth shut, she picks. I go to put the garlic sauce on first. I changed my mind. Just the other two. She got a smug smirk on her face. I really wanted to wipe it off. Get another piece of bread. So I do, and then she asks about the chipotle steak. I tell her, I'm so sorry, but we don't have steak at the moment. Why is it on the board if you don't have it? This is just ridiculous. Don't go promising things to people if you don't have them. The teen grabs her mum's arm because by now the line was to the door and everyone was looking at her. She told her mum to stop. No, I'm not going to be lied to like this. The daughter cut her off and said, This is why I live with Dad. Just take me home. The daughter walked outside. Karen looked at me, then the people behind her. She just asked for her sandwich to be wrapped up. She threw down a 20 and walked out with her 2 sandwiches, looking down. Good tip at least. Okay, update. She came in today alone with a big smile on her face. She ordered the sub of the day and told the manager I didn't give her change, so this sandwich was free. Ha! Nope. I already told my manager about her, and the manager said any change she left on the counter was considered a tip. The manager smiled and said, I've actually already heard from my employee and a customer what happened yesterday. You're not getting a free sandwich. Also, the daughter's hair was a dark blue. You could tell she just did it. I'm sure it teed off the mother to no end. What a piece of work that woman was. I do not envy you having to just stand and take it, and from the daughter's reaction it sounds like this happened all the time. It may also go some way to explain why the parents are no longer together. I know that there are Kens who do this too, and luckily they and the Karens often seem to find each other and at least inflict the majority of their venom on each other rather than the stuff the rest of us get on the unfortunate occasions when they do leave their grottos in search of food. I don't understand how you can be like this to service people and constantly try to score free stuff off local businesses and still see yourself as a good or worthwhile person in life. If this lady doesn't try and change, she's not going to be seeing her daughter much when she grows up and is no longer obligated to spend a certain amount of time with her under the rules of joint custody. Will Karen learn her lesson and place an appropriate amount of blame on herself? My money is on no. The author is a champ, as is her manager this one time for supporting her. Now, let's just get Karen banned from the subway for when she inevitably tries to come in while the manager is away to score some kind of revenge victory. Today I messed up by getting fired because I cried. Okay, so this happened about 2 hours ago. First of all, a little backstory. I'm a 25-year-old male who lives in Iran, which is a very crappy country to live or be born in. Everything here sucks and is incredibly hard, including finding a job. I've been unemployed since COVID hit my country, and just recently, I managed to finally find a job. COVID is still raging here since they won't vaccinate us, so most times we work from home. I was dating this girl for about 9 months, which I know isn't a long time, but since I'm leaving the country in a few months forever, I really invested myself into this relationship because we planned to leave together, and everything was going so smoothly. My anxiety was practically gone, and I was really happy after a really long life of being depressed. Yesterday, out of nowhere, she breaks up with me and tells me that she isn't feeling the relationship anymore and that I'm a really good guy and she doesn't want to hurt my feelings in the long run, which destroys me, but I do understand. I tell her to give us another chance, and she says no, it's better this way. She's a very honest person, so I believe her and leave. I accept the outcome even though I immediately start crying. Anyway, today I was still pretty bummed out, but I had to go to the office for a couple of hours. My boss is there to help me, which is a big relief since I really don't feel like working. I take a smoke break and immediately get reminded of some memories, and I start crying a little bit. I go back upstairs and my boss immediately finds out that I've been crying and insists on me telling him what happened. Which I do. It's not that common for guys to be emotional here. We've been raised to oppress our, quote, feminine feelings. He looks me dead in the eyes and says, "Wow, you're crying over that? Such a weak person. I don't think you're a good fit for the company if that's the stuff you're worried about. I think you should leave." At this point, I start laughing, because this is clearly just a joke, right? Wrong. He looked at me like I'm insane and asked me to leave immediately, so I pack my stuff and do as I'm told. Yesterday I had a girlfriend whom I loved and a job and a good future ahead of me. Now I'm just a guy who has to leave this country and everyone he loves because he was born in one of the worst places possible, and he's doing it completely alone and broken. Honestly, maybe boys shouldn't cry. In short, my girlfriend broke up with me. I opened up to my boss, and he thought I was weak, so he fired me. I don't think any reasonable person could say that this was on you, pal. Tears don't make us weak, they're just a sign of pain. I remember the most devastating breakup of my life. Gosh, those moments where you're just commuting home or on a break and the overwhelming sadness hits you are rough. Constantly going from being completely fine to barely holding a straight face with tears in the corner of your eyes is just a raw deal for anyone. And I live in a country where I couldn't get fired for it. I've checked up on your profile, and while I couldn't specifically find if your move worked out, you seem to be alive and well. You have to be commended on persevering through your truly rough situation, and in case anyone was wondering, the jerk here is clearly the boss. Imagine seeing one of your employees at their absolute lowest and just thinking to yourself, what could I do to make this person's situation just that bit crappier? Best of luck, author. I hope you find some more happiness and stability down the line. Never lose your emotional honesty. It's fine to cry. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. New travel policy to save money ends up costing so much more. My company was on a cost-saving kick and decided to look for a way to shave pennies. Now, they could have looked at the amount of money that was squandered by people jetting all over the country on company time at a huge hourly rate. Basically, the labor spend is always much higher than the cost of the flight, car hire, hotel, and food combined. Or they could have looked at the number of strategizing away days that HR went on. But no, they came for the lowly engineers. When the company starts counting paperclips, you know you're about to have some fun. We were called to a consultation session. Read, we're telling you what we've decided based on what we think goes on and not what actually goes on. The session was about saving money on hire cars. In our company, if you have to go away from your home site, you can use your own car and choose a mileage rate up to about a 40-mile journey. If it's longer, then you should have a hire car. Hire cars are usually dropped off at the office by a transporter, or you can pick one up at a hire office, or you can get it dropped off at home for a small fee, £14 plus fuel. Travel department announced that there were going to be no more drop-offs to save money. The engineers knew how this was going to pan out, and we said nothing. The thing to know here about the travel department is that they don't travel. None of their knowledge is from the real world. Travel announced that the new policy was that home drop-offs were to cease, and we had to pick up the hire car at the office or at the nearest Hertz rental location. Sounds simple. All the engineers who travel a lot could instantly see the issues, but as we were told, this is the new policy that we had to comply with. So we did. Maliciously. I was on a job 300 miles away at the customer site. I traveled down on the Monday morning, starting at 6 a.m., and back up on Thursday, home at about 6 p.m. Because of the travel time, I got the Friday off. I also lived a 100-mile round trip from the office, and my nearest Hertz office was at the airport. This was not an unusual situation. A lot of people I worked with traveled to client locations. The weekend arrived. Usually at some point over the weekend, a car is dropped off and the key and paperwork is popped through my letterbox for the princely sum of £14 and no time from me. Instead, because the Hertz office was closed at 6 a.m. on the Monday morning, I picked up the car the day before. Because my wife needed my car while I was away and therefore couldn't leave my car parked at the airport, I took a taxi as per company travel policy, £35 and 40 minutes. I picked up the car, which took about 30 minutes, and I drove home, which took another 30. On the Thursday evening, instead of heading home and getting the car picked up on the Friday, I headed straight to the airport, dropped off the car and took a taxi back. £40 and another 40 minutes due to busy traffic. Our expenses are done monthly, so by the end of the month I have 3 weeks travel to account for, which would have been just 3 times the £14 plus a small refueling charge for the trip back to the Hertz office. Instead, they got about £200 for taxi fares and an overtime bill of about 4.5 hours at £80 per hour. And I wasn't the only one. Some engineers took a taxi into the office to pick up the car, as their spouse needed the car while they were away as well, wink wink, and then some took a taxi to the nearest Hertz office like I did. All of us put in our overtime at the end of the month. Travel has no overtime budget, so it all got claimed from the project. The project labor budget teams went ballistic and went all flaming torches and pitchforks on the travel department. The policy didn't last the day after the end of month's reports. Yeah, this is really one of those stories that could have been avoided by literally just asking for input for the people whose work you'd be affecting the most. Seems like the entire engineering team in question knew exactly what was going to happen. More to the point, the author's expenses were likely reflected in the rest of the team's actions as well, so a policy that was meant to save maybe a couple of £100 at most would have ended up costing thousands, and the author and co got paid overtime into the bargain. So they win, and hopefully the heads of the company knew not to just take everything the travel department said as truth in the future. You know, in the last few videos here, it's been really hammered home to me that the business organizations are truly just as capable of colossal wastes of money as the government-run ones that they're often compared to. Big brain moves like this seem to happen a lot in the stories we get submitted here, and I'm beginning to think that this kind of thing isn't the exception. I got told, "No parking outside my house, that's my space," on a public road. And then a punctured tire led to a year of long, petty revenge. There was a bloke who lived over the road from me. He had a little "no parking" sign in his front window. Keep in mind this was a UK public road and plenty of places to park. The guy just wanted his space. No one living at his place was disabled, so the, quote, need to have his space was just simply that he didn't like having to walk a car's length away. Screw that guy. So I parked in front of his house because, you know, it's a public fricking road. He comes out and goes ballistic. That's his space and, "You'd better move it or else." I refused. Next morning, the front tire has been stabbed. Fair enough, I can't prove it's him. But it definitely was him, so revenge time. I bought an old Ford Fiesta for £300. This was back in 1990. It was a complete shed and genuinely had 14 owners before me. But it had a Ministry of Transportation certificate. In the UK, every year your car needs to go through a series of tests at a certification location. Read inspection garage. Just to ensure that it's roadworthy. I think new cars, 3 years old, are exempt. The car needs to be MOT'd to have valid insurance. The certification lasts 12 months. So this car had that, and I'd taxed and insured it for virtually no money. I waited for his wife to move their car from, quote, their space, and I parked that bad boy right outside his house on the public road. Again, the bloke comes out and goes crazy. I just smile and say, "Enjoy." The police came around a few times, but I just showed them the MOT and insurance documents. I also told them the story of Mr. No Parking sign. They laughed and left me in peace. If someone reports a car as abandoned, they'll come around and put a notice on it, and you, as the owner, can then reply to the notice to say it isn't abandoned. And that's what I did. I'm sure the rules and laws have changed since then. It was 30 years ago. I left that wreck outside his place for a full fricking year. Tires got stabbed, windows broken, it even got spray painted, and kids were playing in it, which enraged the bloke even more, and I just left it. Called the scrapyard with a day left on the MOT, and I laughed myself silly every day. Yeah, how's your little parking sign working out for you now, you moron? And by the way, I was going to put another junker there. In fact, we moved a few months after the first car got taken to the scrapyard, but I still considered repeating the process even though I didn't live in the area. I, in the end, decided to spend my cash on something else instead, but it was an option. I mean, you have a certain level of petty malicious jerkiness yourself there, mate, but at least it was directed at someone who was indeed a much bigger jerk than you. Honestly, you're another jerk vigilante. If you're going to inflict it all on a completely out-of-line and territorial idiot like this who's willing to vandalize someone else's property for an imagined parking space that he had no legal claim to, then just go ahead. I'm only slightly concerned about how much of your time and money you put into your revenge scheme. The fact that you were on the fence about whether to buy a second junker car just to make this man's life a misery says that maybe you should find a hobby or something outside of torturing him, but again, I'm not your supervisor. If you think that making a Ken angry is the best use of your limited time here, then I'm not going to stop you. In any case, good for a laugh, thanks for that. Our landlord told me, "Go ahead, call the city inspector." So I did. This happened in 2018. I'd just moved to a new apartment. It was a 3-bedroom, first-floor apartment and it had a finished basement. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen on the first floor. It also had a nice bedroom with a full bath in the basement and a bar and gaming area. It was also in a very nice area of the city. The apartment was owned by a corporation. Honestly, we loved that apartment until it kept having recurring issues in the basement. The carpet was wet from time to time. At first, the landlord would send a cleaner to come and handle it, but it kept happening. I asked them to check and fix the issue, and they didn't do it. I told him I'd call the city inspector to check the building, and they laughed at me and told me, "Go ahead, call the city inspector." So I did. I called the city twice until I was finally connected to the right department, and they sent an inspector a week later. The inspector found so many building violations. They told me they'd contact the building owner and would come again. The next day, the owner called and begged me to tell them what I know about the problem with the apartment. I told them that I sent complaints multiple times and they should check their record. The city inspector, the owner, and the property manager came 2 weeks after that, and the city inspector was giving them an earful. He laid it to them and it was bad. They had to deal with structural and foundational issues and some safety issues too. There were 4 tenants in that building, including us. Imagine it was a big colonial multifamily home divided into 4 apartments. They had to break the lease with all of us to fix the building. They couldn't fix it with us being there. We were ready and had already consulted a lawyer, and we told them that 1. We wanted our deposit back before moving out, 2. They paid for all of our moving expenses, and 3. They paid for our deposit at the next place. They couldn't kick us out and they couldn't rent the apartment after the inspections. There were 4 of us and we could all sue them for placing us in a dangerous building. In the end, they spent so much money to relocate us and fix the apartment. To clarify some stuff, 1. The other tenants received money and some compensation from the landlord too. They also got their moving costs covered as well. I didn't make them homeless, some of them thanked me. 2. We moved to a new neighborhood that was only 5 minutes walk to my office. It was a single-family house. We loved that neighborhood. It was so LGBTQ friendly. We stayed there for a year until we bought our first house. The rent was actually cheaper than the house. 3. The building was owned by a corporation, so when I say landlord, it refers to the owner and property manager. I hope they learned their lesson. Excellent. It's nice when doing exactly what these jerks sarcastically tell you to do gets massive consequences for the party that's wronging you. And it seems like you got a whole bunch of the usual expenses of moving essentially negated by reporting these violations to the city. So let's recap. They sarcastically told you to take a course of action that A. broke your lease and got your deposit back, a feat that many of us struggle to achieve even with a decent flat, and B. meant that they paid you extra, and C. finally resulted in them being legally obligated to fix the problem. I mean, what did they think was holding you back from taking this option that only positively affected you, and why did they bring it up in such a sarcastic manner? They were very cocky. So yes, as is most often the case, the landlord and soulless corporation was the villain, and in this case basically pointed our protagonist in the exact direction that would get them exactly what they were asking for and cause the company a whole bunch of damages into the bargain. Spectacular. A con artist frames me for crashing into their car. But then I have a con of my own. As a bit of background, this was back in the 1990s. I'd recently been medically retired from the military and was attending college in Texas. My wife was working in her chosen field while I did my level best to decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Anyway, one day I left campus, going around the backside to avoid the traffic. I was heading over to pick my wife up for lunch and ended up sitting behind another car at a stop sign. The car in front of me was a brand new Chevy. One of their little gorgeous models, the actual trade name escapes me at the moment. It was in candy apple red and being driven by a fairly new blonde, also a little gorgeous model, whose name will also slip by unuttered. I sat, an old sailor in an old pickup, just listening to the radio and thinking about lunch, when the Chevy drove into the intersection and then stopped. I didn't think anything of it, so I hadn't done any more than put my hand on the gear shift in preparation of pulling up, when suddenly, with a suitable squeal of tire, the Chevy shot back at me. I slapped the shift into reverse, but it was too late. The little Chevy smashed into the front of my truck doing around 25 to 30 miles per hour. After a second, I cut my engine, got out of the cab, and walked around to the front of my truck. The good news was that I could see that I wasn't going to have to worry about that loose belt squeal anymore. The bad news is that the front of my little pickup was pretty much totaled. Grille drove back into radiator, water all over the pavement, headlights smashed. I bent down and noted that there seemed to be oil leaking as well. With a sigh of total incomprehension, I walked further up to the passenger door of the little red Chevy and its blonde driver. I was annoyed, but not enraged. I guess I was still trying to figure out exactly what had happened and why she'd ended up stopping in mid-turn and put it in reverse like that. I looked through the tinted window and she was on the phone talking agitatedly to someone. With all the cell phone silliness I'd seen since leaving the military, seeing her yapping on one really didn't surprise me. Although, had I thought about it, I should have wondered who exactly she was calling. Instead, I tapped on the window and she turned a bland face to me and then screamed into the phone loud enough to penetrate the glass, "Oh my God, he's got a tire iron!" Naturally, I spun around and looked behind me, and then the nickel dropped. I turned in a slow circle and noted there were no businesses, houses, or apartments in view, nor was anyone on the sidewalks or walking down the road. For that matter, the only traffic was several blocks away in any direction. Her little car was sitting at the stop sign, almost exactly where it had been when I pulled in behind her. I stepped back and looked at our vehicles. Yep, it looked for all the world as if I'd rear-ended her. Damn, the little witch had set me up. I quickly walked back to my truck, thinking as fast as I could. Any minute now, a police car was going to show up, called by the little blonde lady, expecting to find a crazy man with a tire iron, and I dearly needed to not be that man. I pulled my tire iron out from behind my seat and threw it as far as I could into a nearby field, then jumped into my truck. It was a slim chance, but it was the only one I had. I made sure the truck was in reverse, and then I belted myself in, slammed my face into the steering wheel, opened my door — I was hearing sirens not too far away — and half slumped out into the open door at an uncomfortable angle. I went limp just as the police car screeched to a halt. I ignored the policeman, screaming at me to get out of the truck, trusting that my limp body would not move him to open fire. He finally edged his way over, noticed the bloody nose, tugged at an eyelid. I made sure my eye was well rolled up, and then let me drop back into position. I stayed limp while he checked on the blonde, who was near hysterical with fright over the lunatic with the tire iron. Haha, until she saw me, that is. I'd hoped that her rearview mirror was as off as it looked, or that she'd be too involved with concocting her own story to notice what I was doing. At seeing my body hanging limply below the driver's door of my truck, she stammered to a halt. A second set of sirens had been getting closer, and the policeman told the now silent blonde to stay in her car. A few seconds later, someone cut me out of my seatbelt and laid me on the ground. A competent set of hands checked my vitals, and within a few seconds, a harsh and demanding smell flooded my clotting nose. I fought it for a few seconds and made a pretty good display of a man coming around after having been knocked out. I immediately made to throw myself to the side, and stopped, half being restrained and half staring wildly around to see what had happened. The medic sat back, when I sat up and looked at the front of my truck and moaned, "What the frick did that idiot do to my truck?" He told me to lie back down and started asking me professional questions about where I hurt and could I feel my toes and all that crap. Every few seconds I'd look back at the wreck and mutter about the idiot backing up like that and what the heck he had been smoking. Little bits of angry stuff. The policeman, having gotten the blonde's statement, walked over and asked if I felt up to talking. I said I felt fine, just a little sore. The medic okayed it and helped me get back up to my feet. I gave the officer my license and proof of insurance and included my retired military ID card, then sat on my front seat as if I'd just noticed it and asked me what had happened to my seatbelt. He explained that I had to be cut out of it and I just shrugged. Just another item for his insurance company to pay for, I guess. What the heck was his story, officer? Why did he back up that way? The policeman looked sharply at me and asked me what I meant. I described exactly what had happened, but concealed the fact that I knew it was a female driving the Chevy and kept referring to her as him. After I got done and he'd finished writing it all down, he asked if I had any proof. Proof? What do you mean proof? I frowned at him and then I let my jaw drop a bit. Hey, wait a minute. You're not telling me that idiot is saying that I did this, are you? He admitted that the other driver's story was that I'd rear-ended her, not him, and then threatened her with a tire iron. I frowned again and informed him that I didn't have a tire iron, that it was sitting on the garage of my house a couple of hours away. I moved aside as he searched the cab of my truck and caught a lucky break when he noticed, without my having to point it out to him, that my truck was still in reverse. He got out of my cab, frowning, and then asked me to stay where I was and walked up to the Chevy. He then asked the blonde to step out of her car, and when she had done so, leaned into the open driver's side door. After a few seconds, he stood back up and asked the girl to repeat her statement of what happened. It was a marvelously teary bit of acting, but she almost blew it by being somewhat puzzled when he didn't react. Instead, he asked her to go on and describe everything that had happened after the accident and everything she had done then. She backed down from the tire iron story, saying that it might simply have been a reflection on her own window, but insisting that I'd at least beaten on her window and that I'd been simply putting on an act for their benefit. The policeman looked over at the medic, who slowly shook his head. Years of doing search and rescue might not have done much good for me physically, but I sure as heck know what an unconscious man acts like. The policeman then asked her if she had tried to drive away or if she had immediately shut off her engine. She said that the engine had died, and no matter what lies I'd said, that she had never tried to leave the scene of an accident. The police nodded once and asked the medic to step over. He then asked the medic to sit in the Chevy and confirm it was in reverse. I love smart people. I didn't even have to suggest that he check. When I last saw the little blonde, she was honestly crying. She was also handcuffed and being driven away, arrested for making a false police report, some legal mumbo-jumbo about trying to run a con, and my favorite part, assault and battery. Once she had realized that she had blown it, about the same instant she was handcuffed, she started weeping and explaining that she didn't have the money for the payments on the car, and that her only option was to fake an accident, but that I'd been faking too and hadn't been injured. You've got to believe her. She wouldn't lie about that. I signed my name to an almost letter-perfect statement of events over at the police station, being careful to never mention in my own statement about how my nose got banged up, or how I'd ended up unconscious and hanging out of the door. The arresting officer's report, as well as the EMT's, had already noted that it appeared as if I'd been partially ejected by the impact, or might have been trying to get out of the truck at the last moment. I've always believed that one should never sign one's name to a false statement. Wisest in the long run, don't you think? I realized later, however, that the keys were still in the ignition, but I'd turned the engine off after the accident automatically. My whole pretense would have completely fallen apart if the policeman had simply noticed that the engine was turned off. It's wild to think about. Turned out her car insurance was good, however, and they paid for my little pickup's repair. The damage wasn't as bad as it originally looked, thank God. A little front-end work, a new radiator, and assorted other dinged or dented gizmos, a little cosmetic surgery to make her outside look right once more. Heck, the mechanic is even going to toss in a full overhaul, including fixing that damn fan belt. I had to drive a loaner for the next week, also care of the blonde's insurance, and the irony of this will make you laugh. The loaner was a little red Chevy. Nice car, and my wife and I had a ball riding in it, but way too expensive for a guy like me to drive every day. Heck, a car that nice might have made me try something stupid to make the payments. Oh, and dumb as it might seem, yeah, I went back to get the tire iron. I waited until dusk and then took the wife's old beat-up Honda over there. It took me about an hour to find the silly thing, not because it was particularly well hidden, but because I hit the dirt and flattened every time someone drove by. Paranoia and guilt in equal parts. This is a terrific story. Also, the author was lethally analytical and quick on his feet, even with his wee blunder of the tire iron and the ignition. I have no idea what I would have done to get myself out of this one, and would probably have been got by this selfish woman. Look, if you're in this much financial trouble, surely you can try and sell or downgrade before you go through the trouble of trying to frame an innocent person for tons of money and damages, and get him into trouble for assault into the bargain? I understand that I'm giving out my moral judgments from my computer editing chair, but I don't see any way in which this doesn't come out with her being an absolute scumbag. She had made a conscientious decision that she was going to frame some other person, presumably a person of a lower income bracket than her, judging by the beaten pickup truck he was driving, for her debt. Absolutely unforgivable. She definitely deserved everything she got, and it's a great argument in favor of karma that she ran into the one person more able to run a convincing con than she was. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Woman keys car because it's too loud? So for some background, the car we're talking about isn't mine, it's my brother-in-law's. He's suing the lady in question for about 60 grand for the damages. I don't know the exact car model, but it's a muscle car and it's manual. So, it all started when I decided that I wanted to start learning to drive stick. Since my brother-in-law, Bill, is the only person I know with a manual car, I had him come over and teach me. When the car starts up, it does make a rather loud rev. We made sure to do it in the afternoon so as to not wake people up and try to be considerate. Anyways, it was about the third or fourth day of him teaching me when she first appeared. The Karen came over to us and said, "Nice car. A bit too loud for my taste, but it's still nice." I said, "Oh, thanks. Mind trying to keep it down a bit? My baby doesn't really seem to like it that much." "Yeah, sure. We've been driving in the day so it doesn't wake people up. I didn't know anyone around here had a baby, so I'm sorry about that." "It's not a problem. Just be quieter, okay?" And with that condescending tone and a smile on her face, she walked off. Which kind of made me mad because I thought it was a friendly chat. It wouldn't be the first time people have talked to me about Bill's car thinking it's mine. I've grown to accept that people will think whatever. So I play along and just tell Bill about it later. 2 days go by with no sign of her. I wake up, get ready, and wait for Bill to come over so we can start my lesson. I walk outside and lo and behold, she's there. "I thought I told you to keep it down." "I'm sorry, I can't control it. It's just how the car starts, and we're not going to leave it running while we're not in it. That's a waste of gas." "I don't care. Stop being so loud." With that, she was gone. It always annoys me when people complain about cars being loud. A car is a motor vehicle with a combustion engine in it. Of course it's going to make noise. Brother-in-law got to my place and off we went. We came back to my house to eat at lunch. About 2 hours or so later, my sister and mum come over and tell Bill and I to go and look at the car. The entire driver's side was scratched up and even a tire was popped. Only one person came to mind when I saw it. Karen. We, meaning me and Bill, walked down to her house, which was only a few houses down, and knocked on her door. All we hear come from the other side is, "I'm not apologizing." So this led my brother-in-law to say, "Then you'd better have a good case in court, you B-word. That's going to cost a lot more to fix, and I'm suing you for every fricking cent." "Well, maybe keep it down then, you hick." "Maybe don't go keying cars and popping tires and you won't get sued, you bimbo." This went on for about 20 minutes. We head back, call the police, and get everything ready for what was about to come. As soon as they got there, we started to explain what had happened. How I was learning stick, how the car was, we showed them the damages, and told them what the Karen had said. We were making sure our side was accurate, so we made sure our timeline was correct. After a while, we walked with the police to her house, and it went down about as well as you'd expect. They said, "Excuse me, ma'am, can you come out of there for a minute? This is the police department wanting to speak to you about the car." "I'm not apologizing. I told them to keep it down and they didn't. They deserve it." "Ma'am, what you did is against the law and they're pressing charges. You have 5 minutes to get out here or we'll get a warrant for your arrest and come back." "Nice try, but I'm not stupid. I know my rights, and you're not allowed to enter my home without my consent or a search warrant." That's only partially true. We can't search your home without a warrant. However, if we have a warrant for your arrest, we can legally enter your home and place you into custody." She was stubborn. Again, they went back and forth a bit. After the allotted time set, we went back to my house and the cops left to get a warrant and we waited. Currently, the lawsuit is in order and the trial is in a few days. She's in police custody. I've never found it easier to drive stick shift knowing I won't have to deal with her condescending ways and tones. We won the case. We got the money, the car is being fixed and she's moving. Her choice, not the judge's. We had 2 cops that can confirm she admitted to doing it. We have pictures, and we've been looking around the neighborhood asking if anyone saw her actually do it, and so far, no one has. I mean, Karen, come on. If you're going to pull vandalism as blatantly as this, you need to at least deny. I don't know whether you are insanely honest or just really dumb. Then again, she's probably a future Darwin Awards recipient for lacking the imagination to realize that everyday street sounds, like cars, are going to happen in their neighborhood from time to time. Also, her response to being caught for a crime was, "I warned them I'd commit crimes against them and am therefore not in trouble." I get that being a new parent is hard, but you don't get to vandalize people's property for that. She could potentially have got out of a huge amount of trouble if she had learned from the guy in the first story and just pretended to have been asleep with the TV on when the cops arrived. She's not only to blame for the situation that happened, but also she's to blame for being caught so clearly and unambiguously as the perpetrator. The narrator wonders if the author and his brother decided to step up their vehicular practices after the law got involved, just to rub things in. Alright, I guess I'll leave then. This happened sometime in 2014, but I only recently realized it might count as malicious non-compliance. You all be the judge. When I was in grad school, I got a job at an in-department office that ordered and maintained testing supplies. I started off at the bottom of the ladder, but was willing to learn more. By my second year in the program, I was placed as the, quote, manager and given a 75-cent raise. Yay! The work wasn't too difficult. I was responsible for taking requests from professors, getting price quotes from the companies, getting the price quotes approved, and placing orders. There were some other duties, but that was the most difficult stuff I've ever really dealt with. Occasionally, I'd have to deal with our ordering department when they messed up an order. I reorganized the office in a more efficient manner and created multiple new systems for dealing with issues. I practically ran that place for several years, and it ran well most of the time. During that time, we hired a bunch of new employees. They just wanted an easy job, but my boss wouldn't take my recommendations on who to hire. In my fourth year in the program, I was asked to order some test kits by one of the program heads. The test kits were related, and I found out they could be ordered as a combo kit that would save us space but cost a little more. We were low on space, so I figured it would be worth it. I got the price quote and got it approved by the program head and then the department head. I placed the order. When the kits arrived, the program head was thrilled with the combined kits and thought they were fantastic. Several weeks later, my boss informed me that I shouldn't have ordered the combined kits, that they'd emptied the program's budget, and that the program head would never have approved them if she had known. Luckily for me, I had the emails of me sending her the price quote with both price per unit and total cost of her approving them. My boss was rather stunned that the program head had lied, but insisted that I take the fall for it. Florida law always favors the employer. She told me that I could either take a demotion or quit. I'm pretty sure she thought that I'd take the demotion, but I quit instead. Joke was on her. None of the other employees were willing to do much, and all had refused to be trained on ordering. The joke around the program was that the office I had managed burned down after I left. It was in complete chaos for months as my boss, who had a lot of other responsibilities, had to figure out how to do the ordering and many other things that are done single-handedly. Yet another great example that, while no individual employees should be irreplaceable, a real incompetent workplace can make them as such by putting all the responsibilities on a single pair of shoulders and not training anyone else to do them. Everything that this employee got punished for and everything that went wrong afterwards was management's fault. It's also wild that their boss would rather quietly punish someone who'd done nothing wrong than actually properly assign blame. People not being held properly accountable, or at least being shown that they were at fault, is the reason why such self-assured and incompetent leadership structures get built up in the first place. Ugh, this makes me so annoyed. I don't know if this varies from state to state, but as a final FU, couldn't you have at least refused either option so that they had to fire you, with all the hassle and accountability that's involved? Maybe Florida is rigged so far against the worker to make that unfeasible as well. Who knows? I made an after-death email that went out before I died, that led to an extremely awkward situation. This starts about 6 months ago. I caught a pretty bad cold that had me in bed for a few days. At the time, I kind of got it in my own head and convinced myself I was probably a day away from dying of the pandemic disease. I had heard all of these terrible stories about people being unable to talk, on ventilators, having final Zoom calls with their families. I didn't want to go out like that, so I set up a dead man's switch. For anyone unfamiliar with the term, it's basically anything that activates when it stops getting input from the user. Common uses are engine cutoffs on the machinery, or that little clip thing on treadmills that pulls loose if you fall off. A less common use is threatening hostages with an explosive device that will automatically go off if you get killed by police snipers. If you've seen a movie where someone is blackmailing someone else and says the information will go public if anything happens to them, you get the idea. So I'm lying sick in bed and I write a series of emails to various friends and family, telling them how much they meant to me, thanking them for supporting me, among other things. The email to my wife has lists of all of my passwords and other info she might need to deal with my passing. My wife is also pregnant, so I left behind a message and advice from my unborn child. I subscribed to a system where I get a link emailed to me once a month. If I don't confirm that I'm still alive by clicking it, after a set amount of time, the emails go out. A few days later, I was feeling fine, and the whole thing now seems a lot more silly. I figure I'll keep it active. There's always a chance I'll get hit by a bus or something, and I liked the idea of having a final goodbye. Over the next few months, I click the link every time it comes in, and on several occasions I add more emails since I have more time. You can probably guess where this is heading. Work gets busy, we're back in the office, I'm not spending all day on my own computer, and I miss a link email. Completely forget about the whole thing. The emails eventually go out. The timing couldn't be worse. It's been a busy week, so it's been a little while since I've talked to most of my family. My wife is out for the evening, so I decide to get baked and spend the night playing video games. My phone is somewhere else in the house, and I'm unaware it's being flooded with messages and calls from people who just received an email from me that starts, "If you're reading this, then I'm dead." My wife comes home early, and I'm not really in a great state to explain what's going on. Eventually, I get her to understand what I've done, and she helps me message and call everyone and explain the false alarm. That was 2 days ago. Most of my family is still pretty angry at me. And there's a pretty even split between people who think the idea was sweet and people who think it's the dumbest fricking thing they've ever heard of. The one silver lining is that I had at one point strongly considered leaving messages telling certain colleagues and family members exactly what I thought of them, but decided that insulting people from beyond the grave was just a little too petty. My wife is fine with it since she never really thought I was dead and was touched by the message I left for her. I've now left a series of paper letters in a folder that can be delivered with a proper setup instead of a randomly timed email. In short, I left a series of messages intended to be sent after my death, and it went off early. Family is mad that I freaked them out by making them think I'd passed away. This is fantastic. I refuse to believe that after enough time your extended family aren't able to find this in the least bit hilarious. Like, I understand being absolutely horrified when you think the event has actually taken place, and that your dear darling son has in fact shuffled off the mortal coil, and being annoyed at him for scaring you like that for a few days. But surely, this got better in the days and months that followed the story. This seems like one of those things that the poor author will have dragged out to ridicule him at every family gathering, and honestly, it's fine. That's what families do. They're definitely not any kind of villain for doing this. They set up a kind and considerate message of pure love for their nearest and dearest. At least it ended up being a message of pure love after you took away all that nasty, vengeful stuff about the people you didn't like. The narrator honestly wants to know what that section was like. I mean, I don't really need to read another beautiful and heartfelt message about the joys of life and things that make it worthwhile. I want to read 8 pages of pure venom from a man who had nothing left to lose and was using some of his last remnants of strength to stab at his enemies from beyond the mortal coil. I bet if you thought you were dying, you could write some delightfully wicked things. Am I the jerk for exposing my parents' favoritism? My parents have always favored my younger brother. I was by no means unloved, but it was blatantly obvious who they cared about more. I worked a part-time job to get my first car, but my brother got one as a present. It wasn't new, but was much newer than my car. It was the same with just about anything else, like clothes, video games, and cell phones. I started paying rent after I turned 18 and got a full-time job, as I'm taking a gap year before community college to save money. I did work part-time before that, but they didn't ask for rent until I was 18. They wanted about $400 a month. That didn't seem so bad overall, but a while back I heard my parents talking about how much they were going to pay for my brother's tuition. I secretly recorded the conversation from around the corner, and then came out asking my parents why they were going to pay for my brother's college but not mine. They didn't notice my phone was recording and just said that my brother needs more help. I asked how so, when I wasn't getting any sort of scholarship and he likely wouldn't either. Then I asked a few more questions about why things have always been this way. They got mad and my father told me that perhaps it's time I moved out because they're sick of keeping a roof over my head. I pointed out I pay rent, but they didn't care. I left the room and in a fit of rage uploaded the video to 2 different social medias I have and ranted about how this is how my parents have always been. Well, a few hours later my parents were pounding at my door. My dad was screaming at me about how I made them look bad. We fought some more and they left the room fuming. My grandparents contacted me later and said they were appalled and then came to visit with a lot of family the next day. There was a huge family intervention and my parents were made to sit on the couch and look at their feet while being told off. It was then I found out they'd been receiving money for years from my grandparents to help with family expenses. My brother looked like he didn't know what to do, so he sided with the rest of the family and said he's noticed how I'm treated as well. My parents gave me a huge apology that sounded forced. My grandparents have offered that I come live with them soon and will cut off the monthly payments to my parents. My father told me I should never have told the rest of my family and now won't talk to me, and my mother has been crying for days. So I'm starting to wonder if I went too far. Update: I decided to go ahead and call my grandparents and to accept their offer to move in. During the phone call, I asked them why there were monthly payments being sent to my parents. Turns out my parents were living beyond their means for a while because my mother quit her job to be a full-time stay-at-home mum. My grandparents decided to help out by sending them money monthly to help with my parents' mortgage, and also to set aside some of that money for college savings for both my brother and I that was to be split evenly. Turns out my parents only planned to put that savings towards my brother's college, and that's also how they brought his car as well. So from now on, my parents are now on their own financially. Likely, my mother will have to go back to work to help my dad keep up the mortgage. I confronted my parents and asked why they've always treated my brother as the favorite, then asked if there was something I needed to know. Turns out there was nothing. Literally nothing. I'm not an affair baby, not an unplanned pregnancy, they just like my brother more. I was mad as heck and we argued a lot before I left the room because I'd had enough. My grandparents showed up on Saturday with a moving truck. My parents were floored when we started bringing in boxes to pack. My father got in our way and I reminded him how he said that I should move out, so I am. My mother cried some more and said that my father was just angry in the moment when he said that, and they'd been counting on my rent money to help with my brother's college fund. I asked if that meant he'd never have to pay rent like I did when he turns 18. My father then said that since I was taking a gap year to work, that my rent money could have helped my brother, which means they never intended for him to get a job while going to college. My grandpa was enraged and confronted my father, saying he raised him better than this. He chewed him out, saying he's never been more disappointed in him and they'll no longer receive any financial support. He said that he'd disown them both if they ever tried to retaliate against me for exposing them. My father backed down and neither he nor my mother said another word to me. I had a bit of an awkward conversation with my brother as we said our goodbyes to each other. And that was it. I just got in my car, waved, and drove off. I'm now fully moved into my new room at my grandparents' house. It's a little smaller, but nice. And my grandparents are very welcoming. I'm going to keep working hard to move forward from here, and I appreciate everyone's support. I plan to keep in touch with my brother in time, but for now I'm going to hang back and see how he is by the holiday. If he starts blaming me for leaving, then I'll know where he stands. I just hope he learns from this and doesn't rely on our parents too much. So, am I the jerk for exposing my parents' favoritism? Goodness me. Yeah, I really can't sympathize with your parents here, as their only reason for villainizing you is for exposing how terribly they were behaving in the first place. As I've said before on this channel, if it can be destroyed by the truth, it probably deserves to be destroyed by it. Clearly, they're mooching off other people and collecting money for said mooching into the bargain. Aside from the audacity to be angry at you when your only wrong is accidentally exposing them, we haven't even touched on their lack of accountability on why they're so negligent and hostile to the author. The update where they just seem to explain that their eldest's money is needed to pay for kiddo number 2, while the eldest gets nothing from anyone, is truly baffling. It's just that everything in their lives should obviously go to one kid and not the other. No explanation. It doesn't even seem like they look at it from any moral perspective, just that apparently this is how it should be. How can your awesome, supportive grandparents give rise to a father like that? If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Entitled Mum Parks on Our Grass. Recently, we moved from Missouri to Ohio for my husband's job. We moved during the summer and have children at 3 different schools, but all 3 schools use the intersection kitty corner from our house. My younger 2 go to primary school here, which is kindergarten through 2nd grade. Since the kids are so young, many parents walk their kids down, but some have recently started driving 2 blocks from their house to the bus stop. Well, there's one mum in this green Jeep that has made it a habit to park on our grass in the afternoon to wait for her child. I didn't make a big deal about it the first few times, but after a week of straight rain during the fall, her Jeep made huge muddy tire tracks in our grass. I'm talking 4-inch deep huge marks where the Jeep was nearly stuck. She had to back up to get out after 5 minutes of letting the tires spin. The following day, I walked up to her Jeep and knocked on her window. I kindly asked her not to park on our grass anymore, especially when the ground was so wet, and pointed to the huge tire marks. She gave me a really snotty look and rolled her window up. I don't like confrontation, so I was sort of relieved when the following day, a Friday, she parked somewhere else. Monday afternoon rolls around and I looked out my window as she's pulling up and see her look to my front porch where I normally sit to wait for my kids. When she didn't see me sitting there, she peels into my grass, onto the same tire marks as before and digs them in another 2 to 3 inches with mud flying everywhere. I was beyond livid, but I knew this wasn't going to go anywhere if I tried talking to her again. So I made a beautiful, professional-looking sign and hung it up. The sign says, "Please do not park on our grass. Smile, you're on camera." So we don't have a camera that points that way, but she didn't know that. She stopped parking there for 2 whole weeks until the rain and snow destroyed our sign. Today was the first day she decided to try parking there again, and I'm so happy she did. Right after she got her kid in the car and went to take off, a police cruiser pulled up and cited her for parking too close to a stop sign. No, I didn't call them. It was all completely coincidental. Ah, hello, sweet, sweet karma. That'll show Karen for taking advantage of someone who sounds like a very sweet and mild person. I'm not exactly Mr. Aggressive, and I'd be right up there having words with someone who decided to excavate my yard with their tires. And you know what? The law would have been on my side too. You deserve the satisfaction of watching this lady get slapped with a parking violation, and her complete lack of consideration landed her with what she was due as well. And her kid got to learn what happens when mummy behaves like an entitled witch too. Everyone wins, everyone learns. Am I the jerk for telling my twin that she should have worked on herself instead of expecting me to let myself go for her wedding? My twin sister, May, and I are identical. At the end of our first year of college, I was in a car accident. I ended up with a facial scar and major trauma. I started seeing a therapist because of the nightmares and the fact that I was panicking any time I got into a car. That led to me realizing there were some deeper issues which we worked on. As part of that work, I got a physical, started working out with a dietitian to fix my diet and the smorgasbord of vitamin deficiencies it had caused. I started working out, strength training 3 days and sprints or HIIT on 3 with our older sister. By the end of our first year of college, we'd each gained about 30 pounds, but by the end of the year, I'd lost half of that, but I was smaller at 134 pounds than my previous 120 because of muscle mass, and that's been my size for the past half-decade. I found a new beautician and she gave me long layers to make my natural curls be curls instead of waves of frizz. I always wanted that, but my old one said I would look bad and refused. I stopped bleaching it and let it go its natural dark blonde and light brown. I stopped spray tanning. Again, that's been my look for the past 5 years. I live in a rural area and the internet isn't great. Things like FaceTime just aren't options, and I can't post a lot of pics on social media because of it. This is relevant because a big issue is that my twin sister May didn't see me over the quarantine. We talked on the phone a couple of times a week, but it mostly revolved around her wedding planning. She got engaged before the Rona put us on lockdown. I wasn't her maid of honor, so mostly I was being told decisions, not involved in the process. When it came to the bridesmaid dresses, May sent our sister, sister-in-law, and me a link and told us to get it in our size. Same with hair and makeup, but we had to arrange for a beautician because May's wouldn't do more than 4, and she wanted her friends at the appointment with her. She didn't do a bachelorette party with us, she did with her friends, or a rehearsal dinner, so May didn't see any of us until the start of the wedding. She was livid. Apparently she thought my sister and I would have stopped working out because of the Rona, even though we did it at home, or that we would have stopped when she announced her engagement so that we didn't upstage her. She was mad because I didn't try to hide my scar and didn't have a fake tan like her. Said it was implied that I should have kept it up. She made several snide remarks before throwing a drunk temper tantrum at the reception, basically accusing the three of us, but me especially, of trying to upstage her. I don't have that excuse because I was a designated driver, so sober, but I quite famously have a low tolerance for angry or crying drunks. I told her, "If you're so insecure, you should have got off your butt instead of expecting us to lay on ours to make yours look better." It only got worse. Our family is on my side because I didn't start it or do anything, but his family and her friends are giving me crap. To be honest, it's got worse since the incident. I don't really know what set it off then, but it's been worse. So, am I the jerk? So there might be some flack to the author for outright announcing that her sister was out of shape in front of everyone, but yeah, this is pretty unhinged on your sister's part. I guess I can see how it rubbed a little more salt in the wound than usual, given that you're identical twins and your presence is showcasing that you might be doing a better job with what you have, which is a warped perspective all on its own, but it doesn't mean that her behavior is remotely okay. We don't get to be angry at other people for being hotter than us, even on our special days. Otherwise, some of us would be angry all the time, and I'm sure your sister had still done everything within her power to make sure she looked great, and that no one would have noticed if she hadn't pitched a fit. Look, folks, did you see Kate Middleton getting drunk and screaming at her sister in the royal wedding? No. And that was the most televised and well-known version of the sister upstaging the bride, in the same way as this story here. So get some perspective and grow up, sister of the author. My classmate saved goldfish by releasing them into the ocean, and I called her an idiot. My classmate recently made a TikTok, and she showed a group of people at lunchtime. They were next to our table, so I overheard the girl say, "Hey, look at my TikTok I made, come check it out." And in it, she explains how she, quote, rescued goldfish from the pet store and released them into the ocean so they could live free. I was horrified upon hearing this. I love fish and have several aquariums, so I'm fairly knowledgeable on them. I walk over and I ask her to show me the video, and I face-palmed. She asked me why, and I said, "You realize you're actually a moron, right? This is one of the stupidest things I've ever seen." Her friend says, "Well, that's just rude. Why would you say that? Because she cares." To which I had to explain that goldfish are freshwater fish. They can't survive the ocean because it's salt water. So all those goldfish were dead in minutes. They basically choked to death as salt filled up their gills. Lastly, you never release animals into the wild. There are goldfish that are destroying our rivers and lakes because of idiots like her. They say that I'm a bully and walk away. I later get called into the principal's office, who told me I was expected to apologize, and I said no. I stand by what I said. Screw ignorant people who destroy the environment. My parents were called over and I got sent home, and my parents are annoyed that I refused to apologize. I might get suspended. I mean, the narrator just wonders how old the author is for this story. The fish killer's actions are somewhat in keeping with someone around the age of 10 or younger. If they're over that, then they are a scathing indictment of whatever country they come from's education system. Not so much commentary here. It sounds like the other girl meant well. The author probably isn't a jerk for pointing out that the other girl is just mass murdering the residents of her local pet store, but they probably could have been more tactful than just walking up to them and opening with calling them a moron repeatedly to their face. If that was your exact delivery, you shouldn't be a diplomat or anything anytime soon, but as we've established, you could be any age, so you have plenty of time to get some people skills. I hate my neighbor. So I found a legal loophole to get her evicted. This happened about 4 to 5 years ago, but just the thought of this time still has my butt puckered with anger, despite the revenge. It's been cathartic to write it all down, so thanks in advance. The story begins with me looking for my first property. My late father was battling terminal illness at the time, and because of some technicalities with the healthcare system, he needed to prove he lived in my province for more than 50% of the year to get the treatments covered. They were staying at a friend's in town, rent-free, and as they didn't own the property in our province anymore, they signed on to the place with utilities for my place to show records of them staying here. We found this place and it was perfect for us. Smaller building, allows dogs, 2 beds, 2 bath, 5 minutes from the hospital that my partner worked at and my dad was getting treatment from. However, going through the condo documents and minutes from the last couple of years of meetings, We find records of an ongoing spat between the previous owners of my unit with the people below. There were complaints from both parties, police called, a few other things, resulting in a very expensive sound evaluator contractor to come in and check if everything was up to code. His evaluation had the currently installed flooring at double above the condo and city bylaw building codes, and it stated that any further complaints would be ignored on the matter. So we decided to go for it anyways. Well, about 3 months after we moved in, my mother and father moved in with us, as my dad's treatments became a lot more intrusive, and with how often he was in the hospital, they wanted to live as close as they could. Now enter the girl who we'll call Haiti, the entitled princess in her teens, I assume, taking pre-med at the also nearby university. Myself and my partner are very quiet people, and we hadn't heard a peep from the first 3 months living there, so we'd kind of forgotten about the sound issues we'd read about. We were on the second floor and Haiti was on the first floor, facing the back of the building. Her suite only had one bedroom, which was under the room that had been vacant until my parents moved in. My parents are also quiet people, but because of father's treatments, he was sleeping 16 hours a day at home, and this was crucial time for him to sleep and recover. A week after they moved in, I have friends over on a Sunday at 12 in the afternoon. They walked in and hadn't even sat down yet when I heard a knocking on the door. I'd prepared for this conversation, but I was still surprised. She said, "Hi, I'm from downstairs and I'm trying to study. Please keep it down." I said, "Listen, it is Sunday afternoon. We're not having a party or making excessive noise. We have been and always will be respectful of noise in the building. Have a nice day." Later that day, I stopped by the shop and got a good pair of noise-cancelling earbuds and left them with a note outside her door to apologize for any unintentional noise, but to reiterate that nothing we were doing is outside of regulations, and any noise we're making doesn't violate any building noise bylaws. I try my best. A couple of days later, I'm moving something around in my parents' room and I hear a loud banging from below. I figure, oh, she's nailing up a picture or something, and keep working. It happens a second time and a third time, and then I hear a door slamming below me, and a couple of seconds later, just loud banging on my door. "What the frick are you doing up here?" Instantly, I'm taken aback. Wait, was she just banging on the roof? I'm not a confrontational guy, but this is ludicrous. I said, "Were you just banging on the roof with a broom at us?" "You bet I was. You need to keep it down. I'm in pre-med and studying. You're banging around on the floor and I can't focus." I said, "If you have a complaint, you can take it to the condo board. Banging on the walls or ceiling is completely unacceptable." And I slammed the door. After the incident, I myself went to the condo board and let them know what happened and how it was completely unacceptable for her to bang on the walls and floors, to shout at me and my family, especially when the noise we're making is unavoidable and not excessive. The condo board tell her if she behaves like this to us again for this issue, they'll fine her the maximum for each amount of banging on the walls or ceilings. I think it was like $500, but only for those instances. Her mother, just as belligerent as her but lives out of town, wrote a nasty email to me and the board saying how her princess needed to study and how the fat people shouldn't be stomping around. I'm 6 foot and 160 pounds and my partner is 5'3" and 100 pounds, but they still relented on Haiti. Haiti does quiet down for a week and then starts with the music. If we walk across the floor, accidentally drop something, move anything around, instead of banging on the roof, she'd turn up her music. Loud. Like I can actually hear and make out words to songs I'd never heard, let alone the bass shaking my stuff. There was no unit directly sharing any walls with her unit, so no one else complained. It would go past 11 p.m. a couple of days a week. I'd call the condo board members and no one would answer as it was so late. I'd then call the non-emergency police line and they'd say, "We can bring someone out in a couple of hours, but only to give a warning due to the bylaws." It got worse. She'd turn the music on and leave the house. It would go 12 to 16 hours a day every single day. If it were just me and my partner, it wouldn't be that bad. But like I said, my dad was going through very intense treatments and needed to sleep to recover between treatments. The stress of it, combined with the treatments and his decline in health, was definitely starting to impact my family. I spoke to her once about it, explaining the need for quiet and again in the letter to the others. No empathy at all. I then wrote a lengthy open letter to the condo board regarding the full situation, the harassment and other things in an attempt to shame her. I printed it out and put it under everyone in the building's doors. It didn't work. I rented a decibel meter and tracked how loud she was, but according to the bylaws, it wasn't breaking any rules. But the condo board said they wouldn't do anything about it other than send her another warning. If I recall correctly, it was 20 decibels allowed between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. above resting volume. My home was about 40 decibels with nothing going on, and between 65 and 70 decibels with her noise. For anyone that doesn't work for OSHA, 70 decibels is as loud as if she were playing music directly in my living room. After months of this, I was desperate. The police could only say, "Just keep it down." The condo board refused to do anything but give warnings, as noise complaints weren't really something they would fine owners for. She'd mostly leave and have the music on out of spite, and she said she left the music on for her dog. Sure you did, witch. My only recourse was to somehow prove that she was doing it intentionally to harass me and to take it to the police, or find a way to get the condo board to do anything. I combed the condo documents looking for something. Please, just anything. At last, I made a breakthrough. I figured this 19 to 20-year-old did not pay for this condo and wasn't an owner at all. I used some connections to get a copy of the land title for the condo, and then I found my golden goose. Armed with my decibel meter and a notepad, I'd been tracking her music for the past couple of months, averaging 14 hours above 65 decibels. I brought my findings to the board on a blizzardy, frozen Canadian February. It was Thursday night at about 9:30 p.m. The board looked tired and irritated that I made them meet this late. However, I came prepared. I had a stack of papers containing scanned copies of sections of the condo documents, the logs of noise I'd taken, along with a letter typed up by my lawyer buddy. I read the letter out loud to them. It threatened legal action against the condo board for ignoring my complaints and not taking me seriously. They seemed to perk up a bit, and the condo president looked angry. I showed them proof that I have very real and provable damages, my father's health included, from the inaction of the board, plus the very detailed logs of frequent bylaw infractions that were ignored, as well as the emails back and forth from months of the board not doing anything. They looked at me bleakly. Finally, I said, "I won't file this if the board actually resolves the issue." And I played my best card. I put down a copy of the land title certificate with Hattie's mother on it, and the clips of the condo documents detailing that if the owner isn't residing in the unit, Hattie is technically a tenant, not an owner. The next section explained in exquisite detail the punishments available to be meted out on tenants, including my favorite. Tenants can be legally evicted for breaking condo bylaws after 2 warnings. I then showed the printed copies of the previous warnings issued by the board regarding this harassment. After a couple of minutes, the board president spoke.
"Going 5 decibels over what is allowed isn't that bad. You're blowing this out of proportion."
I'm furious. Had she not been listening to me? Knowing that I'd just left my home at 9:30 p.m. with her music at full blast, and it was 10:20 p.m., I said, "Fine, let's go see." And we all shuffled down to my unit. We stood in the kitchen, listening to the same crappy song that had played on repeat all day before, and the president spoke up. Comically, she had to raise her voice to be heard.
"She plays it like this all the time?"
"Yes."
"I'll go ask her to turn it off."
"You can try, but she isn't home. She left this morning."
"What do you mean? She's left her music playing this loud all day?"
"Yes." The board president is visibly upset. The bass shakes the spoons in the drawer next to her. The other board members have dark looks. She grabs the documents and says, "We'll call the condo lawyer." The aftermath? Saturday morning comes around. I hadn't heard any news from the condo board. As I'm making my way to the kitchen, I hear the patio below us opening and closing, which was out of the ordinary. In my bathrobe, coffee in hand, I stood in the window overlooking the back. It's a wonderful winter miracle. Fresh snow from the day before made the trees sparkle. The cold winter breeze was blowing a light cloud off the roof. And there, in the middle, trudging through the deep snow, is a very cold and uncomfortable-looking Hattie taking boxes of her stuff into a U-Haul. The sight is sweet, and I sip my coffee in pleasure. Hattie sees me as she walks back into the house, and her face goes from grimace to fiery glower. She would have killed me with that look were it not for the window between us. I smile broadly and wave. A little later, I get an email from the board stating that they threatened her mum to evict Hattie if they have any other single complaint, and that for each instance they would tack on the maximum fine of $500 as well. It seems she decided to move out rather than put me to the test. I got to watch her and her small friend spend 3 hours struggling to force large furniture through the deep snowdrifts. She would have seen me and my family watching in the window the entire time, every time she made her way back for another load. Only after they closed up the U-Haul and left for good did I breathe a sigh of relief. Wow, I try to maintain some ambivalence here on the channel and at least outline small grievances that the jerk party might have had. But seriously, get effed, Haiti. If a couple of fairly light people and their frail father undergoing treatment are producing earth-shattering thumps when they move around upstairs, then I'm a monkey's uncle. I do find it rather hard to believe that none of the other units in the area could hear if she was blasting music that loud, though. That said, neighbors like this woman definitely exist and seem to actually get energy from screaming complaints at the sound of someone setting a glass on the table upstairs. It's just that normally those neighbors are significantly older than Haiti and very, very bored to be bothered going to the trouble of complaining. Maybe she had a similar lack of stimulating activity in her life from a complete lack of a social life, which in turn would be a circumstance brought on by her sparkling personality. Who knows? Learn from your mistakes, Haiti, and try to just fricking cope with the sounds of life around you in the big, beautiful world. Oh, and the author in this case mentioned that the buildings were well soundproofed. It'll sure be interesting for Haiti if the next place has less protection from the hustle and bustle of other human beings, won't it? If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for only going to black salons? Hi there, this is my first post and it's a throwaway. I'm a 30-year-old white woman with thick curly brown hair. 3C, if you know what that means. I've always struggled with my hair and was adopted into a family of people with straight hair who couldn't care for my hair properly, leading to huge knots and regularly getting my hair massacred by scissors to make it short to be easier to deal with. When I went to uni, I met my best friend, who's black and has a similar kind of hair to me, and when noticing my struggle, they really helped me out. She showed me hair products from brands intended for black people that really helped with my hair quality, and even took me to the salon she went to that catered for black hair types. My hair has been amazing ever since. They've been the only people to understand how to care for my hair and make it look nice. Well, onto the actual argument. Me and some friends from work went out for dinner and we were talking about our hair, and I commented that I go to a salon that specializes in black hair care. One of the other girls, also white, commented that it was inappropriate for me as a white woman to take advantage of black products and services that should only be used by black people. When I asked why, she said it's kind of cultural appropriation. The others there agreed with her, and I felt uncomfortable ever since. I don't know if she's right and if I'm in the wrong. I don't even know what I'd do if I was in the wrong, and I don't want to go back to the salons that butchered my hair before. Speaking as a white, try-hard woke soy boy, I feel like your friend may be even more of a woke try-hard than I am. Surely these products are just made for a certain hair type that most black people and some white people happen to have, right? It's not racist to buy and use products that work on your hair. As for the salons, if you feel like you go there and no one seems to bat an eyelid, why the heck not? And the owners and operators would surely have words or give you a weird vibe if your presence there was unwanted. Like, surely the fact that your hair just needs this kind of treatment that these places specialize in is reason enough to be there. And you're helping their business. Giving patronage to businesses isn't cultural appropriation. And if you get on fine with everyone at the salon and nobody seems to think it's weird, keep on keeping on. I don't think we should be speaking for black people, as a white fella myself. Park in a private space and block an entrance? Alright, pay the fines and the damages. This incident happened in the summer of 2018. I only took a small part, but the real star was my landlord. A small background. It's common in my country to have apartment buildings next to houses, yard and all. I live in one such building. It has 10 apartments. 2 on each of the first 4 floors and 1 in the ground floor and 1 in the top floor. The top floor is used by the landlord when he and his family come for vacations. He lives abroad. The rest are rentals. We also have a small backyard with a side entrance. This is an important detail for later. Next to the building is an empty lot. also belonging to the landlord. We use it as a private parking space with signs visibly saying, "It's private." It takes 10 cars, one per apartment, and has the side entrance. Also, I was the longest tenant, so I was the superintendent. My job was to be the liaison between the tenants and the landlord and communicate any problems and concerns to him. The problem started when the house across the street from us was sold. A lovely old lady used to live there, but when she passed away, the house fell into disarray, especially the large yard. The new owners were Ken and Karen. Fake names, but trust me, they lived up to the meme. They immediately began major renovations, which was acceptable, but they also started to park their cars in our 2 empty spots, one for the landlord and one for the lady on the ground floor that didn't own a car. At first, we'd tell them they were reserved spots and they'd move their cars. But when they noticed the spots remained empty, they parked there permanently. I'd notified the landlord and he told me to take pictures, log every incident and always notify the police. We started doing that every day. Ken is a hotshot local businessman, and every time we called the cops, he'd cause a scene about us being jerks. He always got a fine, but he very blatantly proclaimed he wouldn't pay them. Oh, and for context, if a vehicle isn't obstructing traffic or in a spot that is absolutely forbidden, like disabled or emergency vehicle parking, then a fine is just what will happen. It used to be a joke in the capital that in some places it was cheaper to pay the fine than pay for parking. Now, the worst part came about a month before the landlord's annual visit. They stopped using one of their cars and left it permanently in front of the side entrance, blocking it. That was a huge issue. You see, the lady living on the ground floor is a renal dialysis patient and 3 times a week goes for a session in the local hospital. The ambulance brings her back and usually parks next to the side entrance because she's exhausted after a session. With Karen's car parked there, that wasn't doable anymore. And they still weren't moving it after the police were called. I notified the landlord and tried to hold one of the hotheads in our building off from doing anything foolish. One of the calmer things he proposed was slashing their tires. Finally, our landlord arrives. I hand him the photos and the logs, and he calls Ken over. Tony, the landlord, calmly explains that they're not allowed to park in our space and to move the cars. Ken's response was, "Who the hell do you think you are? I can park anywhere I want." Now, Ken thinks of himself as a big fish in our small town, but Tony is a big fish in a major foreign city, and he's very creative when someone annoys him. He told us to leave the spot next to the side entrance open for the weekend and he'll take care of things. We do that and Ken parks his car next to his wife's. Sunday evening, a tow truck arrives and unloads an old Citroën DS, also known as the Frog, blocking both their cars. Next morning, I was woken by the buzzer, and when I go downstairs, Ken and Karen are there. They're both livid. They can't move either of their cars. Tony joins me, all smiles. Ken sees him and blows a gasket. He starts shouting and cursing. Tony, still smiling, replies, "I don't see a problem. My car is legally parked. What are you going to do about it?" Now, Tony, being the owner, and us the tenants, have the right to park anywhere in the lot. The Frog was parked behind their cars. It was legally parked in a private property. Blocking them was intentional, but not illegal. Ken angrily gets into his car and reverses on the DS, crushing them both. Tony's smile became one of a shark. He immediately called the police and pressed charges against Ken. Tony had illegally brought the DS from his cousin who owns a car repair and restoration shop. The car was a restoration project and was insured. The court found Ken liable for the damage done. They also found out that he was true to his word and hadn't paid any of the tickets. The fines for the tickets alone were almost €2,000. He leased both of his cars and they dropped him as a client immediately for purposefully causing an accident and damaging the leased car. They're suing for damages. Ken got another car, but learned his lesson and hasn't parked in our spots ever since. Excellent revenge story. Ken sounds really unstable, and it obviously didn't take much to know that he was going to write his own downfall with his entitled behavior and continued disregard for the consequences of his actions. I think we can unanimously declare Ken the jerk here. Hope you learned your lesson, Mr. Hotshot Businessman. Doesn't matter how much money you have, private property is private property. Sounds like he stuck around though and didn't cause any more issues, so he wasn't affronted enough to uproot his life. Everyone gets to move on, justice is dispensed, Well done, Tony and everyone in the building. He gets a massive pay rise because my boss says he can't work from home. But then the entire company transitions to working from home. This story is about a coworker who we'll call Joe. The company we work for is fantastic, really good pay and benefits, and the work really isn't that hard. However, like most places with incompetent management, that one department was really bad. And everyone knows it, and from day one it was obvious that Joe was one of the hardest working people on the team. And our awful manager Samantha couldn't stand him. So this is a few years into Joe's tenure with the team, and for whatever reason or another, Samantha decides to put Joe on performance notice, which is basically an HR notice that says you have 6 months to get your crap together or you're fired. The reason on the paperwork was improper attitude. Joe was the kind of guy who always speaks his mind, and while management says they love this, brutal experience shows this is a lie. The problem with notice is that it also comes with penalties. No work from home, they literally take your laptop away and bring you a thin client, no approved overtime, and no learning new things or assignments. Oh, and no raise or bonus. You have to prove you can do your job well, and then after the 6 months, if you're not fired, the manager can extend with an additional probation period of another 6 months. January of every year is when we find out about our raises and bonuses from the previous year. And to put it delicately, that January, they effed us. To the point that one person walked out and 2 older employees, more than 30 years each, took retirement packages. Come February, we're drowning, and Joe can't work overtime, and Joe can't learn new things. Manager's orders, remember? Well, this is the middle of Joe's probation period, as Samantha predictably extended his notice. So this is where we find ourselves in mid-March 2020. Cue malicious compliance. During the lockdown, they send the whole company home. Everyone is working from home except Joe. He's home, just not working. He technically can't. And about 2 weeks into the lockdown is when Samantha finally notices. She goes ballistic. "Why aren't you working?" Blah blah blah, on a team email with everyone CC'd. He replies, "As you know, I'm on coaching and cannot work from home under your orders." She tries to get HR to fire him, to which they reply, "Samantha, you elected to continue the notice, which still has 4 months. We can't fire him for this, and we can't issue him a laptop until it expires." Turns out the only way to rectify it ASAP was to petition formally with the head of HR that putting Joe on a performance notice was done in error and have all parties sign, including Joe. All this happens except Joe refuses to sign. He won't sign anything until they give him his bonus and raise, which they do. The whole thing took a month. A month of Joe basically on free vacation. In short, a coworker on notice can't work from home because of company policy, and then COVID happens. There have been some questions that I feel the need to add some context to. First is the work we do. It's easy. Like any stereotypical corporate job, a concerted effort of around maybe 3 hours a day is enough to do your job. Most people just screw around, chit-chat, and milk the day. Some people go even further and milk the work so much that they need help with their workload. We have a coworker who would literally watch Netflix all day. Management never figured it out either, or they didn't care. I've had days where I've done all of my work before lunch and took the rest easy, and then I've had days where I didn't do a thing. Incompetent management creates so many grey areas. As long as the work gets done, they don't look too deep into who is doing what. And people get away with minimal work, knowing others will pick up the slack. This is where Joe found himself when the pandemic started. The company, which has never had all of its employees, or even a good amount remote at the same time, was unprepared on how to handle the situation, and our managers were even less prepared. Joe literally just found himself forgotten, and didn't raise his hand to tell anyone for a bit. Oh, and Samantha and Joe? Ironically, when I left the team last year, she had to promote him, and then he moved teams as well. That performance notice thing sounds like absolute horse crap. A way to niggle and annoy your employees into quitting so that you don't have to pay them severance. The most calculating and corporate way to get someone out of a job with minimal losses and cover your own butt. Anyway, sounds like Samantha was the major fly in the ointment at that workplace. You can't try and fire someone for being in a position that you put them in, Samantha. Joe can't work from his laptop from home if you took his laptop away. It must have been so darn satisfying for him to get a formal letter saying that this was basically all her fault, and to get a retroactive raise into the bargain. I can't imagine that even after that point, Joe was able to contribute that much, after being trapped in his house and having been kept in the dark, unable to learn the same skills as everyone else for that long. Hopefully, he got a good couple of weeks playing video games in around the few assignments they handed him. Sounds like the company was inefficient enough that they wouldn't have noticed anyway. Gosh, the rest of us can only dream of a job where we all get our work done in 3 hours a day for a decent check, with the only major negative thing being an annoying manager or two. Short and sweet. City folk, come at the farmer. I grew up on a dairy, struggling every day 365 days a year to help my family live. About 10 years in, the farmer's land next to us has a single house built onto a small plot near the irrigation riser, and a younger family from the city moves in for the quiet country life. Over the next year, the cops are at our place a dozen times about smell complaints, noise complaints, because work started at 5 a.m., tractors and all, and other complaints about anything this family could think of, basically trying to get us shut down for existing outside the bounds of their imagined country life. In the winter, my dad would drive our tractor around to all the neighbors' houses on our mile and dig the snow out of their driveways so they could drive to work, a costly and time-consuming endeavor, but one of the main things a farmer can do to gain praise and feel good every day. Well, about 3 weeks into winter, this guy from the new house shows up at our door asking us not to do his driveway so early in the morning because it's waking him up. My dad explained he had to do it at 5 a.m. because he did it before he started the other chores that took hours. The neighbor insisted he do it later or not at all. That was the last time my dad did his drive. It turns out you have to wake up at about 5 a.m. to use your snowblower to dig out your own car, if you want to get to work on time. So instead of momentarily waking up at 5 every morning, he just had to get up to do some extra manual labor that he didn't have to do before. And you know what? I bet the guy who complained was too proud to actually come back and admit he was wrong to get the dad doing it again. Sucks to suck. I can kind of sympathize with this couple not realizing what getting back to nature would really mean in terms of life disturbances. But folks, you have to adapt to the situation and to not demand and complain that it won't change for you. This is a reminder to try out something first before you commit to it as a new lifestyle. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Pizza not spicy and well done enough for you? Alright then. So quite a number of years ago, I worked at a large pizza chain, the one with the red roof. Every Tuesday evening, a group of 12 people would come in to eat, usually within 30 minutes of closing time. They'd order one large vegetarian pizza with hot peppers and ask for the pizza to be well done. They'd also ask for chilies on the side. You might think, okay, what's wrong with that? Well, a large pizza would be cut into 12 pieces. This group would come in, take up a large space, only have water, order one pizza, and each person would have one slice, leave a mess, and not tip. They started asking for more hot peppers and complaining the pizza wasn't spicy enough. They also started sending the pizza back to be cooked more. It was already pretty dark. Well, one day they sent the pizza back, but this time asked for it to be remade, not just cooked more. At this point, it was 15 minutes before closing, and I'd cleaned everything and was pretty much finishing up my shift. Of course, the manager has to appease the customers. So I start making them another pizza. They want it spicy? Let's give them spicy. I added a coating of chilies to the tomato sauce, covered it with toppings and added lots of hot peppers. They want it well done? Fine. Let's put it through the oven twice. It was a conveyor belt oven. Normally well done is put in the oven 1.5 times. This thing came out dark and just smelled so spicy. I cut the pizza and give it to the waitress. I'm waiting to get an earful after the customer complains, all prepared with my reasoning that I'm just doing what the customer asked for. I finish my shift and the manager calls me over. Turns out the customer did ask to speak to a manager to say it was the best pizza they've had since they started coming, and it was just how they wanted. They asked if it could be made this way each week and left a very nice tip. Okay, for everyone asking in the comments, yes, the customers were Indian. For others asking why I didn't just say Pizza Hut, I always find it fun when others subtly describe the well-known store or brand. And as for the tip, it was split between everyone. Okay, I was with you in rallying against these guys for a while, but now it just kind of seems like this was a cultural difference. 100% positive result. I also kind of love that turning them into happy, well-tipping customers came from trying to maliciously comply and really annoy them. And I've done that too. A customer who used to insist on lava-hot milk in their latte from my coffee shop. Any barista worth their salt knows that burnt milk, which is achieved by steaming it above 80 degrees, kinda makes the milk sticky and clingy, and makes it taste horrible, as well as scalding the mouth of anyone who would drink it. So one day, after being complained at for the umpteenth time, I decided, screw it, I don't like this job today anyway, and I steamed the man's milk past 90 degrees. It looked bad, it smelt worse, and the customer loved it, and I swear I don't know whether to laugh or throw up. People have weird tastes. Entitled Dad leaves me with his children on a plane. So this happened last weekend. I was flying out of JFK Airport in New York, aka one of the worst airports in the US, trying to not catch the plague. Double mask, frick yeah. When I was in the TSA line, I was surrounded by two families. A mum and her son behind me, and two parents with two boys in front of me. The mum in front of me was tired. Like sitting on a big carry-on bag while her husband wheeled her about tired. Dad was so focused on mum not falling off the suitcase that the boys were just darting about and trying to play with the boy behind me as well. It's 6:30 a.m. and I'm on 2 hours of sleep, so the world is just too much for me. But I also work at a special needs preschool for 2 years prior to becoming a therapist, so I know how to wrangle kids on minimal sleep. I go into crowd control mode, asking the boys about their interests, but reminding them we have to be quiet to talk about them. I found out that the brothers are Eric, 9, and Daniel, 6, and they're really excited about going on a plane. The boys start having a nice quiet convo about Minecraft. The mum behind me thanks me, and we actually have a nice chat about me previously working in the special needs school, and how fun it was. An hour and a half later, and I'm boarding my plane, and I see the tired mum like 5 rows back from where I was seated. She's at a window seat and she's already passed out. I sit, and about 5 minutes later, I see the dad and 2 boys coming onto the plane. The first kid, Daniel, sits down next to me, and Dad pauses for a moment, just staring at me. After a moment, I'm just like, is something wrong? I crap you not, this man proceeds to take the boarding pass out of his second son's hand, swap it with his, and tells his son to sit in the aisle seat. He then bolts to the row his wife is in. Once the disbelief wears off, the boys start asking me questions about the plane and snacks and the TV screen mounted in front of them. I'm so exhausted, I don't even fight it. I show the older one how to turn on the TV screen in front of him and tell them, look, I'm really sleepy, like your mom, so I'm going to take a nap. Both of them tell me to have a nice nap and I pass out. I wake up 2 hours later to my tray down with a nice water bottle and a bag of cookies on it. Apparently, my new friends thought I would want a snack when I woke up. What great kids. 30 minutes before we land, there's a commotion behind us and what sounds like running. All of a sudden, formerly asleep mum is very much awake and looking over both kids to make sure they're all right. Both of them mention how they're watching Moana, so they're perfectly fine. Mum then shoots her husband the neutral face of displeasure. If you don't know what it is, Google the fresh off the boat clip of it. When we get off the plane, Mum follows me to the bathroom to apologize. Apparently, she took some medication to help ease her anxiety with the flying, but it just knocked her out. You can't be anxious if you're unconscious, I suppose. Her husband was supposed to sit with the younger boy while the older one sat with her. She freaked out when she woke up and saw her husband, and in her drowsy state, she thought her husband forgot the children back at JFK, hence her panic. Apparently, her husband thought it was a good idea to leave them with me because he heard me talking about working at a school and figured they'd be fine with me. She apologized profusely, and when we got out of the bathroom, she made her husband apologize for abandoning our children with a stranger. The whole walk out to the pickup area, she was reminding her children about stranger danger and how they need to be careful in big places like this. Daniel gave me a paper heart he folded out of a New York City brochure So I have a new best friend. But yeah, the boys were really sweet and that mum was too. Lots of the replies are calling this one of the few wholesome, entitled parent stories, which I think is good, as that mum was really caring for those boys and they were clearly sweet. That dad though, the audacity. Like, I saw a man throw a suitcase at the wall at JFK and get tackled by a cop, and this dad was still the most audacious thing I saw that day. Oh my god, that dad was absurd. I guess in his mind the alternative was leaving one kid to wreak havoc next to his unconscious mother, but still, they're clearly good kids if treated right, so there was almost certainly a way to deal with it without bailing on your responsibilities as a parent. And the fact that the story kind of implies he just wordlessly refused to acknowledge the potential crapstorm he was unleashing on a stranger, then just kind of ran away from the situation, like the parent from the film Force Majeure? Jeez. I will say that the author in question here was probably helped by the fact that all kids just tend to behave extra sweet around strangers and cause an absolute storm of chaos around parents, but that doesn't excuse the sheer gall and carelessness on display from the father here. Good on the author. It also sounds like the mum was a good sort as well, despite the situation.
Where's Alex?
I worked at a bar in my freshman year and had a manager who was incredibly patronizing and rude. She'd speak to everyone in the most disrespectful way and was even worse with the employees of color. One of her standout quotes was,
I didn't know Asians could speak German.
She indicated she thought we were stupid all the time. My coworker, Alex, a black busser, got it the worst. She might as well have been calling him boy. We complained on his behalf several times and nothing happened. It was also well known he was working a lot to pay down some unexpected debt. One day I came around the corner and she was yelling the classic, "If you don't like it, then quit, whenever you like." Alex just turned red and shook it off. 2 days later, he tells me he has another job and will work both for a while and cut back on this one. One day after that was one of our busiest days of the year, but not worth it because tips are sporadic because everyone gets so trashed. One of the 2 bussers called in sick. My manager was annoyed. Alex became the only busser. She refused to help him. At one point, I couldn't find him, so I just started bussing my tables, because I had a busy but chill section, but still dishes were piling up in the bag. I called the manager to help. She said something rude about him, came upstairs and actually waited by the bathroom door, pacing. So creepy and inappropriate. She got a male coworker to check, but no one on staff was in there. Then she went upstairs. His stuff was gone. His locker was open with a piece of paper that says, "F you, manager, I quit. Now." Happy St. Patrick's Day. The manager had to do the work of 2 giant men all night for no tips. We made bank not having to tip out any bussers. No other coworker could come in to help because they hated her. She cried when she saw that we'd each made over $500 in less than 6 hours, and she couldn't have any of it. I found out later the bussers had planned it, and one pretended to be sick, so they'd force her to work the most chaotic day of the year and then all of Alex's shifts for a week. She suspected, but couldn't prove it. His new job was apparently way better and full-time. Some more details, she was asked to leave because she was causing too much tension and it reached a boiling point when she said a number of racist things and kept misgendering someone. I think they realized she was a liability. Definitely didn't really care about us. This was after 2 years of her because upper management was really dysfunctional and barely present. She claimed she was mean because she wanted kids but was still single. So whenever it was one of her nieces or nephews' birthdays, she had 10 of them I think, she'd get sad. And she told me I should
be sympathetic because you have a man and no one will date me, not even fat dudes.
She unfortunately never saw that saying that sort of thing might be what was keeping people away. Constant verbal diarrhea. She also hated me because I was black and went to a fancy college. She brought it up an absurd amount, like,
"Oh, Linda works here with us, even though she went to Princeton. I guess she just got bad grades."
Nope, just an actor with ADHD who hates office work as a day job and likes working part-time for a full-time wage. That wasn't my real name or school, by the way. She went back to bartending and made terrible money because she sucks. And then she quit that job to full-time plan her youngest sister's wedding for free for 6 months. I can't even imagine how that went with all her insecurities about being single and unbabied. I also imagine her entitled family of 5 sisters, now all married except her, is part of her baggage. No idea what she's up to now since no one wanted to keep in touch with her. She was something. Being unemployed this year really gave me time to pause and think, why the heck was I putting up with that job? Some of my friends who've done restaurant work have PTSD and won't go back to service work now. Amen to that last sentence, author. After more than 7 years of working in busy restaurants with entitled customers, I still have actual nightmares about some of the worst nights. And apparently, actual clinical PTSD from people who used to work in hospitality is a thing. I could work in a chill cafe again, but I think I'd rather be out on the streets than working in fast food or wedding catering again. But anyways, back to the manager. I mean, do we even have to contest that she's the jerk here? Racist, ignorant, fat-shaming, and just sounds like the kind of person you bail on when you get trapped in conversations with them at a party. Maybe there's some hope for her with some serious therapy and soul-searching. You can't just go through life behaving like that and saying everyone else is to blame for your social and romantic isolation. The common issue might be you. She has my sympathy, but yeah, on the night in question with the bailing busser, she got what she deserved. Good job, Alex.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.